Fais l'appel, Madame Griffin.
Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst. Monsieur le Sénateur Farnham. Madame le Sénateur Ferguson. Monsieur le Sénateur Lefondre. Madame le Sénateur Valois.
Present.
Madame le Sénateur Moore.
Present.
Monsieur le Sénateur Pallet.
Present.
Monsieur le Sénateur Mezek.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelard.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen. Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément.
Present.
Madame le Député Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Southern. Madame le Député de Grouville. Monsieur le Député Lewis.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Tadier.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Higgins. Monsieur le Député Masson.
Présent.
Madame le Député Pinel.
Present.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Martin. Monsieur le Député de Saint-Ouen.
Present.
Madame le Député Dublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Labbé.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Wickenden. Monsieur le Député de Sainte-Marie.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Truscott.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Young.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Ash.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Morel.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Guida.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Pierre. Monsieur le Député de la Trinité.
Present.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame le Député de Hegera.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Ayer.
Present.
Madame le Député Pershaw.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Ward.
Present.
Madame le Député Owls.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Pamplin.
Present.
Madame le Député Gardner.
Present.
Madame Griffin.
Prions Dieu. Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton Saint-Nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir le cœur et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de le conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute la délibération étant en compagnie de ta bénédiction, réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple qui t'a plu de commettre le soin. Quand nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite dans la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous induis point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car toi, le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen. Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst.
So, as I alluded to yesterday when the Assembly very kindly allowed me to move some items of business, Senator Gorst is out the island on state's business today.
State's business.
Monsieur le Sénateur Farnham.
Present.
Madame le Sénateur Ferguson.
Présente.
Monsieur le Sénateur Lefondre.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Défaut.
Monsieur le Député Southern.
Present.
Madame le Député de Grouville.
Malade.
Vous jurez que Madame le député de Greville est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le député Higgins.
Present.
Monsieur le député Wickenden.
Therefore, les états sont constitués. The next item of business is proposition P48, empty property tax lodged by Deputy Taddy. Ask the Greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they're of opinion, A, that an effective mechanism should be introduced to discourage domestic properties from being left vacant for long periods, and B, to request the Minister for Housing and Communities to initiate the necessary arrangements for the preparation of an options paper identifying potential mechanisms with a view to publication before the end of September 2022.
Deputy.
Thanks, sir. I think Deputy Young's got his light.
Yeah, sir, can I declare an interest and withdraw from the chamber on this one, please?
Absolutely, Deputy Young, if you wish to.
Thanks, sir.
I have an empty property.
So perhaps for good order, it might be good for the public record if everyone who has an empty property could declare it.
It's up to members if they wish to declare an interest. Constable.
Sir, could I raise a defo on Constable St Mary?
Therefore is raised, and Constable St Mary. Deputy Taddy.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'm going to try and keep this brief on the, and I hope I've got the correct understanding that now that it's been accepted by the Housing Minister, and notwithstanding that there might be some points of discussion that legitimately need to be raised, and of course objections to the principle of what I'm proposing here today, I emphasise the fact that it is in principle, and therefore I will keep it briefer than if I were making an extended speech to try and convince perhaps 40-odd colleagues to try and support something on the understanding that they may already be minded to do it, sir. It's perhaps fortuitous in a perverse kind of way that the census figures were delayed, or rather that also I delayed my proposition by a few weeks, and I really did that so that I could partly speak to some other members, and including the Deputy of St Peter, because we did receive a written communication from the Jersey Landlords Association, and I thought it was I thought they raised some interesting points. First of all, if I can thank Deputy Hewlin for arranging a meeting, I spoke to them, and I realised that actually, although there are probably some key political differences between us ideologically, should we say, without putting too fine a point on it, that I think what we were both trying to achieve was not that far away. The point is, we don't want to see empty properties in the island being left for years and years when we have what some call a housing crisis, what others call a housing issue or problem, and when we've just been through an island plan, when we've been rezoning many green fields in the island, which nobody particularly wanted to do. Some did it perhaps as a last resort, others resisted as much as possible. But yet the census figures have shown that actually, far from the problem resolving itself, it's got even worse. So we started in a position from the census figures in 2011, where there were just over 3,100 vacant properties that were identified. And then when the latest figures came out 10 years later, we find that figure is now above 4,000. So it's gone up by roughly a quarter. That's with doing nothing. And what I will qualify, of course, is that whilst we don't have the breakdown yet for those figures, we don't know exactly why those properties, those potential homes, are being left empty. But what we do know is that some of those homes, I would suspect, could be put back onto, let's call it the market, for rental, or they could be sold, or they could be done up. There are lots of opportunities there for potential and exploring ways to do that. And that's exactly what I'm asking the future housing minister, or whoever it is, it might be a rejig of portfolios to look at that and to come back with appropriate mechanisms for the discouragement of properties being left vacant. I'll emphasise that point again, that for me it's not the reason that a property is left empty that is the issue. There are many legitimate reasons why a property might find itself empty. That could be because it's in between tenants, it could be because there's work that needs to be done to it, and of course we should be applauding that. You know, we all want to see good quality homes out there, whether it's home ownership or for rental. And so when a landlord, for example, is doing up a property, and it might take 3 months, it might take even a year or so in the current climate where it's difficult to find people to do the work, that is fully understood, sir, and it's fully expected that there would be appropriate exemptions. This shouldn't be at all a heavy-handed approach, and nor is it an approach that seeks to raise revenue. The ideal scenario is that this tax, if it does in fact become a tax, or it's a rate, a supplementary rate that is paid, the ideal is that it doesn't raise any money at all, because we have those conversations, that the properties are identified, and no doubt this will require close working with the parishes. And I look forward to that happening as well, because surely they will also be the ones who know to a certain extent where the empty properties in their parishes are, and the conversations can then be had. But there has to be a point at which, you know, after 5 years, after 7 years, and we all know those properties, we've seen them as we walk around and go and visit constituents, and especially at the moment where we may be more than usual revisiting some of the back streets of our constituencies and parishes, and we see that property, why is it still empty? I'm not even sure if anybody lives there. There's been a car parked there for months that doesn't seem to move. And that could be a home for a young local family. It could be a home for a pensioner who needs to be rehoused, etc. It all will have a knock-on effect. So what I'm asking the Minister, the future Minister, to do is to do the relevant piece of work so that an effective mechanism should be introduced to discourage these properties from being left vacant. Here's the key part: for long periods, and to request the Minister to initiate the necessary arrangements for the preparation of an options paper to identify those mechanisms by autumn this year. And, you know, I live in the real world. If it needs to take some more time to put the meat on the bones, that's fine as well. But we will have a minister, or there will be a minister in this assembly reporting back to the future membership with his or her summary of what the problem is. And it will mean gathering more information. It will probably mean a property register, you know, of some kind, of identifying exactly what the state of play is out there. And I think it will have the added benefit of meaning that we gather much more valuable information about the wider issues in housing and in home provision in Jersey. So without wanting to labour the point anymore, I do make the proposition.
Is proposition seconded? Yes, Deputy Pinnell.
Thank you, sir. I support Deputy Tallier's proposition, which seeks to investigate the reasons for the number of vacant properties in Jersey and identify options for reducing them. I'm grateful to him for bringing this matter back to the attention of the Assembly. As the Deputy states in his report, this is a time of housing uncertainty for many islanders, and people across Jersey have expressed their concerns with regards to plans to rezone green fields for development. The proposition presents an opportunity for clear, evidence-based policy development. Deputy Tallier cites data drawn from the 2011 census. This is no criticism of him. At the time of lodging, this was the most recent available data. The first tranche of data from the 2021 census, released on the 13th of April, indicates that the vacancy rate has grown. However, I would stress that census data merely provides a snapshot from one day, and for the 2021 census, a day during the period of the COVID pandemic. So it is important that due consideration is given to creating a complete and well-rounded picture of the true number of vacant properties in Jersey so that Jersey can be used to drive policy options. It may be that an empty property tax is not the right way to influence behaviour to bring housing stock back into the market. We should be mindful that CSSP Amendment 22 to the government plan seeks to introduce a higher rate of stamp duty on second homes. This is another policy agreed by members aimed to reshape the supply and demand of the housing market. So I'm a little uneasy that we are adopting a piecemeal approach to housing policy and related tax instruments. The higher rate of stamp duty has not yet come into force, yet already another policy with a potential tax lever suggested is under consideration. While the proposition is directed towards the housing minister, and work will primarily be carried out by officers within the strategic housing unit, it is clear that input will be needed from Treasury officers if tax levers are to be considered. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Labby, did I see your light, or was that a flicker?
Well, it did flash, sir, so if you're calling me, I'll speak.
I saw your light flash, so yes. I'll
Okay.
call you.
I think that's absolutely right in terms of what the Treasury Minister was just saying, and this is called empty property tax proposition, and Treasury will need to be consulted. And it is a question of the carrot and the stick, and we must thoroughly investigate and check all the consequences, intended and unintended. And Deputy Tallier is absolutely right. We are short on the data here. We're short on information. And although we have a very good breakdown of the different categories of why properties are empty from the 2011 census, and we will have later in the summer the same breakdown for the 2021 census, even the industry of the enumerators, which is considerable, checking up and ringing round and going and visiting neighbours of empty properties to say, do you know anything about this property and why it's empty? How long has it been empty? Even that work captures only 50%. So actually those figures are of that we see from the 2011 census are percentages of 1,500 homes, not the 3,000 empty properties that are on the list. And there would be instances, I can't remember when the Metropole Hotel, for example, when that development was completed, but let's say it was nearly finished when the 2021 census was being done in March. All those properties would count as empty properties, but of course the next month they might have been full. So data and information is key, and we've got to gather that. We've already started, my team have already started talking to the Connotab, because I'm sure we need to tap into their knowledge. It is true that if I left my flat empty in W4, then my council would put up my council tax. And some council tax increases for empty properties are really big. I mean, like 50% more than incrementally it rises year on year. So that's a massive disincentive to leave your property empty. And then as I touched, I'm not going to. I covered a lot of this with Deputy Morrell's questions yesterday, so I'm not going to go over all that. But we do know, don't we? And we see them. There's the properties which are bona vacantia candidates. In terms of the ownership transferring to Her Majesty's Receiver General, and that does happen occasionally. But I think we've got to get tough. With some of these properties are amazing as well, and I think we need to do an audit parish by parish of how many of these vacant properties have been lying there for over 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, and get a system going where we can more regularly say, well, look, it's worth this X. We'll we'll note that, and if a relative does come along one day and can prove that they are the only living relative of then perhaps they are entitled to something. But it's just shameful to see sometimes such lovely houses empty when we have a housing shortage, an acute housing shortage. And so other jurisdictions have tackled this. I touched on the no-use empty schemes, quite prevalent throughout the UK. There's a scheme in Wales which is also very successful, living above shop scheme, and so trying to find those flats above shops which often lie empty or are used as storage, but could actually be good places for people to live. And as far as a Jersey scheme of that kind, I think we have to, what we'd be looking to capture with that scheme is people with, who own a flat or a place above a shop or a former granny flat or a former dower annex that is no longer being used. And those owners maybe just don't have the wherewithal or the cash or the inclination to go through all the bother of bringing that back into a habitable state and renting it out. And the idea, I think, for a Jersey scheme was to take the hassle away from the owner and for it to be like a task force. I'm thinking not a government body, but almost a charitable trust task force who would take this on, this project on, and it would a lot of the schemes in the UK are limited to like a 20 or 30 £1,000 investment. So we're not talking granite barn conversions. That's out of this league. That has to be done by the owner themselves or the industry. But and I don't know whether the properties I'm talking about do exist. Or the owners I'm talking about do exist, but I think it's worth finding out and seeing if and not a government big brother heavy mob going around finding empty properties and giving the owner a hard time, but seeing if we can get people volunteering, if people have a property that fits that kind of bill, needs a bit of a tidy up and a refurb, and we would try to take that on with a capped investment, maybe up to 20 or 30,000 pounds, and see if we can flip the property and put it back in. It's worth a try. It's very embryonic. As I say, we have the models to look at in the UK, and at the moment my team are developing that. So I just also on the figures, one last point, for the 2021 census figures, which the empty properties have gone up by 900. Let's not forget that in March 2021, we were still in lockdown, we were still in restriction, and that was lifted in April. So a lot of those properties will possibly be hospitality staff accommodation, lying empty because the hospitality industry wasn't up and running in March 2021. So there will be reasons, and we await the data from the census and see how much they are able to uncover. And my team will continue to work with all parties and consult and find out some options for the Assembly in the autumn. Thank you, sir.
Senator Pallets. Oh, I must be seeing lights today.
I think I did it by accident like that.
I think it is. Constable Simplard.
Thank you, sir. I think we have to take care that we don't try and reinvent the wheel here. So within the parishes, we have rate assessors. Rates returns are filled out on an annual basis, and we know quite a bit about what's going on. I don't think the rates law, well, I can tell you the rates law at present doesn't permit an increased rate on the basis of a property being empty, but that's an area that I think possibly could be reviewed, and whichever body is chosen to progress this could do that, and I'm sure the Comité de Connétable could play an important role in so doing. There are so many reasons why properties are empty, as has been mentioned and as is demonstrated in the chart shown. And sometimes knowledge is, should we say, made difficult to glean by virtue of GDPR. In fact, one can't just tell people, inquiring individuals, of which one gets many, as to who might own a property. I have vacant, what appear to be empty properties in the parish. People are regularly asking about their ownership. There is a desire to do them up, develop them, or whatever, and we will, as a matter of course, pass those inquiries on to the registered owner. Whether they wish to progress that with the intended developer is entirely up to them, of course. Then, so they're the ones that you can't discover, and very often it's only by virtue of the fact that rates, parish rates that is, aren't paid, that you find that there's a problem, and further investigation can reveal all sorts of issues which indicates the reason why the property is empty. It does take quite a lot of effort. I have some, sir, which have taken a lot of effort, even through legal channels, and haven't quite got there, but the particular one I have in mind has been empty for 4 years, is a property of value, sad family circumstances, but we're on the right road to dealing with that one. I'm very surprised at the numbers quoted in the census. I can't believe that can be true, and the Housing Minister referred to the fact just now that there may be discrepancies as a result of the timing of the census. So, sir, to conclude, I would suggest that the parish rate system is probably the first way of dealing with this without creating a massive bureaucracy. Thank you, sir.
Councillor St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I don't think that Deputy Tadia will have any problem in having this proposition passed. It's enticing, it's straightforward, and it's common sense, really. So all he's asking for today is for an effective mechanism to be introduced to discourage domestic properties from being left vacant for long periods. That sounds reasonable to me, to discourage domestic properties from being left vacant for long periods. It doesn't mean that we're going to tax people heavily. It means that we're going to look for reasonable ways of dealing with this. And as we've just heard from the Constable of St Ballard, and as I'm sure Deputy Tadia knows, there are many reasons that we come across for vacant properties across the island. And what we can't be is heavy-handed and dictatorial in this respect, no matter how urgently we need to find additional homes within the island. Part B is straightforward as well, requesting the Minister to initiate the necessary arrangements for an options paper. Well, whether that would be available by September 22, who knows? But I am going to support the Deputy on this. Clearly, the Island Bridging Plan debate recently showed our reluctance to build unnecessarily, wherever those builds may have been, but particularly on our valuable farming and agricultural land. With regard to the parish rate system that we've just heard from the Constable of St Ballard about, we have been, oh, he's not here, the Minister, we have been approached by the Minister, I say we, obviously the committee, regarding any help that we can give in this respect. However, we are of course constrained by effectively the Rates Jersey law, because the information that is received by the parishes under that law, it's difficult to share. And so we're looking at to see how we can overcome the problem. And clearly all the constables want to be involved in this and want to do their best to help. Although I would say, of course, that even the constable doesn't know every vacant property in their parish, and that, that makes it quite, I think that shows the scale potentially of the problem. So we don't know, for instance, I'm not sure how many vacant properties there are in my parish. I know a total overall amount for the island. So we're looking to resolve this and come up with an effective means by which we are able to pass the information on to the Housing Minister. At the moment, I'm not sure whether that would require a law change, but clearly it's something that he will be looking at, or we will be looking at, as he prepares his option paper. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I'm extremely heartened to hear both the Continental of Saint Laurent and of Saint Brelade talk about the way the rate system can be used to help solve the issue of information gathering, and because they're absolutely right. That is the first port of call. And if law changes are needed, then law changes are needed, and that's our job. And the same with data protection. There's no question that data protection does not stand in the way of sharing that information, but it needs to be done in conjunction with the Office of the Information Commissioner. They will help guide the parishes and the Housing Department to understand how best that information can be shared. But I just wanted to briefly point out, well, really my take on this. Jersey is a wonderful place where all islanders, if they have the means, of course, are able to buy property. And that's a wonderful right for us all to have. But I think now we're moving into a situation where that right comes with a clear responsibility. And that responsibility is that if you own property in Jersey, it is your responsibility to ensure that it is used properly in Jersey. And that means, in most cases with residential property, that means ensuring that it is used to house islanders. Property, in terms of land, is one of our most precious resources. And the island, it's not just something there to make money. It is primarily there to house people. And we are finally, I think, waking up to that fact that we've had a very free market in property for a long time. But the latest census statistics show us that that market is operating inefficiently. If it was efficient, there would not be 4,000 empty properties. And so when there is inefficiencies in markets, that is the absolutely appropriate time for the legislature to step in and to try to correct those inefficiencies. Now, correcting inefficiencies in markets is something of an art as much as a science, and it is easy to make mistakes and get things wrong. So I am also heartened to hear the Housing Minister talk about the fact that he's taking a very kind of deliberative approach to this and is seeking to understand the problem as a whole, and that is quite right. Because it is easy to make mistakes. It's easy to jump in and say, well, we should do this, this, and this will solve the problem, and then actually find that those solutions create other problems. So I fully support this proposition. I'm extremely pleased to hear both the parishes, the government, working together to help this. And I think, and I hope, states members, regardless of their political views, would agree that we are moving into a sense now that property ownership carries responsibilities, and that is to house people in this island. Thank you, sir.
Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. First, I congratulate Deputy Tadier for bringing this proposition. I thank him also for the courtesy in checking with me before he did, that he was able to quote from the Environment Panel findings of some in the last Assembly, which highlighted this problem. The reason I wish to speak, sir, is that I too am grateful for the Constables Lawrence and Sabrello for highlighting the fact that the parish shores are probably the first port of call to go for further information. But I wouldn't wish the Assembly to think that they are necessarily the remedy. When one lets a property, the income from that is taxable and goes to the State's Treasurer. It is not simply a parochial matter. And I think that certainly the rating system may have a part to play in this, but I think there will be any adjustment to the rates for an empty property would, I think, be fairly minor. And I suggest that if we do go down this road, that the greater remedy is to tax on a notional rent, and which is should not be too difficult to introduce, I would have thought. And I would simply wish to the Assembly to bear in mind that I do not think this problem lies solely with the rating system or the price rules. It is a central government issue, and I think we can perhaps impose more leverage if we think in terms of a tax rather than just an increased rate. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Sir Martin.
Thank you, sir. And over the years I've been in the Assembly, I've said a number of times, and I'll say again today, that we should be using to best effect every building and every structure on this island before we seek to build more. And I always aim those comments primarily at sheds and barns, at traditional farm units. Why wouldn't we want those buildings employed to their best effect? In the draft Bridging Island plan, we actually made some progress on that, and it's now easier to use those traditional farm units to convert into units. But so why would we not want an effective mechanism be introduced to discourage domestic properties from being left vacant? Because those empty houses, those empty properties are also structures and buildings on this island, and we need to make best use of those as well. So I'm very happy to support this proposition. I'm a little bit concerned about Part B when it identifies September 22 as the time that must be, the publication must be made, and I fear that may be a challenge that you don't know if you don't try. So I think it's important that we make every effort to get to that timetable if we can. And so I'm very happy to support this, sir. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy St Peter.
Thank you, sir. I thank Deputy Taddy for inviting me to meet with members of the JLA. And what we learned, you probably recall the JLA when this was originally lodged, put in a paper to everybody opposing. And as a result of his proposition, and as a result of the meeting and a total understanding that Deputy Taddier's approach was actually very, very pragmatic and sensible, and acknowledging that a large number of the properties out there are genuinely empty for reasons, the majority are genuinely empty for reasons, there's a change of heart. Quite honestly, there's a change of heart. I thank you for that. What I'd like to see is, and I'm doing a bit of repetition here, is very much more the carrot than the stick. I think when the numbers come out, speculation is always dangerous. I think a very small percentage of them will be genuinely empty, and a smaller percentage of those will be, shall we say, willfully empty, intentionally kept off the market for whatever selfish reasons. And we can have to take a view on that. And I think probably more of a stick view on that. The Deputy Sir Martin raised a very good point, and the island plan has been more liberal on the occupancy levels of properties within the green zone. I think that will possibly free up a large number of those properties that would previously have to be developed as a large unit and could now be broken down into multiple different units and create maybe small communities of cottages. I think these little things will help. I think an update on the property register, which, as members know, the Chief Minister signed the ministerial order to commence work on that one. The project manager, who has to bring the implementation plan together, I believe has been wishes to take the task, and we're going through the paperwork before they can start. The objective is to bring an implementation plan of how the property register will be delivered to the Council of Ministers, or the new Council of Ministers, in September. No, I will be obviously supporting this, and thank you very much.
Deputy Guida.
Sir, I was hoping not to have to talk about this, but I'm really, really sorry. This just triggers me. There are not 4,000 empty properties in Jersey. It makes for a fantastic headline on the JEP. It makes for a very, very nice discussion in the manifestos of some parties, but there are not 4,000 empty properties in Jersey. It is physically impossible. For starters, the census found, and that's the census, that there were 4,000 properties vacant on one day of the year, which is a very, very, very different thing from saying there are so many properties unused and just waiting for people to move in. It is very different. That on that particular day, and remember, you will only know, the census will only know when you fill the form. So there's somebody there that actually took the form from the post box and said, "Wow, sorry, on that day, I was visiting a friend. I was not home. I was in the UK. I was not home." That property did not have somebody sleeping in it in that night. And that's what the census does. So it's really annoying. You know, it's one of the myths and legends of Jersey. There's thousands of properties. The reason why it's physically impossible is because keeping a property empty hurts. It's not something that you do on a whim and saying, "Oh, I've got 10 apartments and I'll just leave them empty because, you know, who is going to bother? I'll just pay the rates. I'll just, you know, when I receive the rates, both rates, I'll just pay them. I'll pay the heating because you cannot leave them unheated. I'll pay the repairs because the property that's not lived in actually needs more maintenance than the property that's lived in. I'll pay the electricity. And I will not get, you know, between 15 and 25,000 pounds of rent. I'll not get that money. Why? You know, it's peanuts. Who cares about 25,000 pounds of rent? No. I will keep those properties empty and just hurt for the sake of it because I'm enjoying it. So this is really not something that is very, very likely. It happens in some markets, exceptionally, that properties are left empty for commercial reasons. This is just not possible in Jersey. The circumstances in the last 10 years have not happened in Jersey. It is just too difficult to do, and there's not enough reasons to do it. Now, I would be extremely surprised if the proportion of properties changed between 2011 and 2021. I agree that the figure may have changed. So it's 3,000 and some there. It's 4,000 now. That's fine. But in 2011, we found that 29% of those properties were between tenants. What can we do about that? Can we have immediate tax? Oh my God, your tenant went last week. Now we're going to tax you £1,000 a month until you find another tenant. But it's completely unnecessary. If you need a tenant today, you get them in 1 hour. You just call any agent and you've got people lined up at your door the next day. Or the next hour if you make it like that. So there's none of those 29% we're going to get on the market quicker than they are today. One that is a little bit disturbing is second and holiday home. Now, second home, I suppose many people in Jersey will have a second home somewhere else, in France or in the UK for historical reasons. It is extremely unlikely that, say, a French person would have a holiday home in Jersey. They'd never have the qualifications. So, apart from people who'd had a family home in Jersey and then moved away and keep it as a holiday home, this is unbelievably unlikely to be the case. And frankly, should we prevent somebody who was born in Jersey to keep their home in Jersey, making it more expensive to keep, just because now they spend 9 months of the year in Brittany? Is that anywhere right or possible? Doesn't make any sense. Property being built or renovated. Well, no amount of money is going to make it faster. We know that. So there's absolutely nothing to say that. That's 18% of the properties. For sale. Well, we want properties for sale, 10%. So 10% of the empty properties, that's 400 this year, are for sale. Well, I'm sure they're not staying for sale very long. And they are going to be filled in. Resident deceased, 6%. Well, again, you're not going to accelerate the probate. You're not going to accelerate the succession. No matter, you're going to tax the succession to ask the court to do it faster. It is not happening. Resident in care home. So you're going to tax them while they're in the care home and they cannot live at home? That's 5%. Owner away long term. But remember the qualifications we just talked about. So you have a job in the UK for 4 years and you get rid of your property and then you can never have one again. And then other reason. That's a good one. 6%. So if we apply 6% to the 4,000 homes of this year's census, that's 240 homes. It's not the thousands that we need, it's 240 homes. It doesn't say no reason. It says other reason. Most of them are going to be very, very good. You know, there are going to be excellent reasons for a number of these. So at the absolute most, we are looking at 240 properties that could be nudged towards having people in them. By nature, it's painful to keep them empty. It is already painful to keep them empty. How much can we tax people to pass that threshold and say, oh, yeah, now I cannot do it anymore. I'll just get tenants. How much money do you need? How much more money than £25,000 do we need to tax them to say, oh, that's it. Now I just can't. I won't keep it for my kids. I won't keep it for my grandmother. I'll just rent it. I'll just rent it now. And are we going to get the whole of the 240? Probably not. Now another thing. And that's a very different aspect, because I actually agree with that. A few of these will have had illegal tenants in them. They will have been declared as, oh yeah, it's empty, nobody lives in it, because your cousin, has just moved in and is paying his rent under the table and doesn't have any qualifications. So that's interesting. That's definitely something we should work on. It's definitely not an empty property. But certainly for the census, it's going to be extremely likely that you're going to say, cousin Bob without qualifications is actually living in my flat. It's very, very unlikely. But that's something we should look at, because that's quite possible. And finally, we have another one which I really think we should do something about, is Airbnbs. It's property that, yes, they were vacant on that particular day. They would probably be declared vacant on any day, but they're used all year as Airbnb. They're used all year round as Airbnb without any of the regulations that apply to hospitality and any of the taxes. And that's another thing that we should care for. As far as I can tell, just by looking at the website, there's between 300 and 400 of those. And that's just on one day looking at the website. If we looked at the whole year, we would probably find that there are a large number of properties that are left available for Airbnb and not rented or sold in the island. So all this to say that if you're counting on this, and again, it seems to have been something very, very important to some of us, it's not going to happen. No amount of money is going to make a difference. There's not this magnificent pot, at the end of the rainbow of properties that we just need to put our hand in and grab. Last thing, actually, talking about putting our hand in and grab. Are we talking about nationalizing or seizing properties? There's already a law on this. A property that is left empty for more than 10 years, is the property of the Crown. And we have a person in Jersey, the Receiver General, whose job it is. He gets about one or two a year. And because he's nice, when he finds an empty property, when the parish says, well, we haven't seen anybody there for 10 years, he does research and very often finds that they actually belong to people who don't know about them. There was an extraordinary example of £1 million property being empty for 10 years. And when he did the appropriate research, he found that their neighbor, who was actually on income support, owned the property but didn't know about it. So should we just seize it and give it to somebody else? When the Receiver General gets a property, it belongs to the property of the Crown eventually does it up and then sells it. So it goes on the market. But certainly we don't get it for free. Thank you, sir.
I have Deputy Ward, Deputy Higgins, Deputy Ash, Constable St Mary and Deputy Stothard. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I want to focus on the proposition itself and not focus too much on what the last speaker was saying, because I think it is addressed in the proposition. There's a very important line in the proposition that says that an effective mechanism should be introduced. That's a really important phrase, and I think that is what is the most important part of this proposition, an effective mechanism. And it's interesting to see that across the Assembly today, there are so many people talking about those possible mechanisms, be it the rate system, be it the taxation system, coming from very different viewpoints, actually. That's the point. This needs to work for our island, because this island has a particular issue. It is 9/5. It has a particular size population and limitations to its housing stock. Now, we either have the choice of building all over our green land, which I personally oppose, as has been seen in the Bridge and Island plan consistently, or we do something with the resources that we have. And an effective mechanism will do something with the resources we have. And I'm going to stand up for, I need to say some words, sir, in support of those who performed the, I've forgotten the name, the census. The name went out of my head then, sir. The census. Because, of course, and the housing minister just popped out, I can see, but when he mentioned that it was a snapshot, and the last speaker said it was a snapshot at that time, yes, that's exactly what a census is. And if you can come up with a better mechanism, i.e., I don't know, tagging everybody so we make their movements, we know exactly where they are, and I don't want to live in a dystopian society like that, that's fine, but that's what census does. And the point is to say, oh, but it could have been somebody, it could have been not empty that day. Correct. A week later, though, somewhere that had somewhere living in it could have been empty. That's the entire point of a census. There are error rates. But unless we use, and it strikes me that from a minister and a government, and join into the line, a political party that has denied so many things because it wants more data, when it gets data that's been paid for by us, that we use consistently, with a department that's been so stretched for having to release this in tranches, all of a sudden that data's not valuable. You can't have your cake and eat it, I'm afraid. You have to either give some faith in those people that we've paid to do the job, or you don't. And you can't just say, well, actually, I don't quite like that data because it doesn't fit what I want to do, so I'm going to ignore it. So I'd like to say publicly thank you to the people who performed the census. It's not an easy job to do. I actually know, because one of my student jobs many, many years ago was to go around knocking on doors, giving out census forms, and it's an absolutely horrific job, if I'm honest with you. You know, that's one of the things that you do. And so we need to use that data. So go back to the proposition, because that's what we should be talking about. To discourage domestic properties from being left vacant for long periods. So the reality is that we are a small island with a limited resource, and the most effective and efficient use of that resource means that we have to have an effective mechanism to discourage domestic properties from being left vacant for long periods, because we don't have the land space. So therefore we have to make those difficult decisions of leadership. And as for £25,000, it's not peanuts to many, many people whose it's a yearly income, to be quite frank. Working all the hours under the sun on a living wage. I think you haven't just about hit it there, a minimum wage. So let's think about that split where we are. Let's think about that. And it's convenient for some political parties to be in denial about that and be in denial about the needs that we have and just ignore data when they fancy it. So let's talk about that one as well, shall we? But let's move on, let's be more positive. Sorry, so again, face recognition lets me down. The second part is to request the Minister for Housing and Communities to initiate the necessary arrangements, and by the end of 2022. What that does is something that I think is really important at this stage in the term. It gives the next assembly the backing of the previous assembly to say, please do something about this. We are leaving you with a legacy here to say, let's do something about empty properties. With a mechanism, come up with some ideas, let's do it, and let's give you a time scale to do it by. And I think whatever minister walks in to do that as housing minister will be actually quite grateful to say, I've got something that was left me in the last assembly. And it gives it an opportunity in the election for us to all talk about that and say, what actually do you want to do? That's the place to talk about these mechanisms. And yes, there are people who will have difficulty because the home that they have, perhaps rather than properties, we should call them potential homes that they have, need some help. Okay, fine, let's get those back there. But let's do that before we build on all the green fields and destroy our natural environment, because that's such an important thing to do. And that's the consistency about this. And if at the end of this effective mechanism then we have some really big decisions for the next assembly. Can we house people effectively the way we want to, or do we have to go down a different line? But once we've got this mechanism in place, once we know what we're doing, and we've got all of these schemes tailor-made to Jersey, because we have to tailor them to our community and our island. Otherwise, they simply will not work. You can't just transpose ideas on people from the UK or somewhere else and say they know best, they've done it somewhere else, they've done it in the city of London or wherever, they come over and do it here and we'll all be okay and we should be grateful because they're marvellous. That doesn't work. They need to know the local community, they need to know local people, and they need to be in amongst it to make the right decisions. So I think this will go through, and it goes through for the right reason. And we've actually had a good debate in this assembly on this because everyone's got an idea. It's exactly the point. So thank you, Deputy Tellier, for bringing this forward, and I urge people to support it. Thank you.
Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. And okay, some very, very good points being made. I must say, I particularly enjoyed listening to Deputy Guida for a lot of the explanations he was coming up with. And that is the sort of information that we need to understand. One of the problems we've had throughout the years that I've been in the Assembly is we have no data, no real understanding what's gone on. And Deputy Tellier is putting forward a proposition that I fully support because it adds another piece to the puzzle that is dealing with the housing crisis we have. There are so many elements to it, and we're aware of some. We know certainly the impact on islanders, but we don't understand all the ramifications and everything that's going on, whether it be in markets or elsewhere. I think the only point that I really want to add is, we talked about this before, and no doubt it'll be talked about again. But what we need to do is take effective action. Now, I was pleased that Deputy Hewlin spoke and mentioned the property register. If you remember, I brought a proposition to the States, the commercial and residential property register. It was debated in the States in September of 2020. It was agreed. It was felt that it was necessary, and we agreed an implementation date. We wanted it to be in by December 2021. Well, the Deputy of St. Peter has told us now they're working on an implementation plan. They're about to appoint someone, and they're going to report to the Council of Ministers in September 2022. So, hopefully. So here we are, 2 years from having passed a proposition that would have given us data as to who owns the properties in the island. And from that information, we would then have been able to find out, for example, the empty properties, who actually owns them, because at the moment, on the parish rates system, they will list companies or trusts as well as individuals. And you have to track it down to the ultimate beneficial owner. We could have had this in place already and be tackling the problems that we have in this island. But all too often, these initiatives are either put on the back burner, forgotten, or for a variety of reasons, delayed. So I think rather than keep on repeating these things, what we need to do is start getting on with the actions, and for the states to insist that these things are done on time and are, so we're given the information so we can actually deal with the problems that islanders expect us to deal with. And I shall actually leave it at that because, as I say, I support it. I believe everyone else in the States supports it as well. Let's just vote on it and let's move on. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Ash.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to Deputy Tellier for bringing this, and I shall certainly be supporting it. One of the main reasons I want to support it is because I think it will, and I think Deputy Guida's speech touched on it, we can actually get some facts wrapped round these figures that we get. Deputy Ward said we've got this figure and we choose to ignore it. No, we don't choose to ignore it. We chose, and I think the official statistician said the same, that particular figure needs to be dug down into to find out exactly what it means. And if we pass this, this will happen. We will find out what it means. We have so many discussions in here where the facts are put out there but not true. One of the things we had on the housing crisis was, well, it's population. It's gone through the roof. The population here is more like 125,000 now. When we had the census, that just wasn't true. Population has not gone through the roof. It is not like Hong Kong. So we had the facts. So the housing situation was not actually caused by the population. Then we had those 4,000 empty properties. Are they empty? Are they really empty? The Limes, for instance, that was X amount of properties that was just about to be demolished. So you probably wouldn't have wanted to be living in there at the time that happened. So when we look at all of them, we have to really establish how many of these are bona fide empty. If it is a lot, then happy days really, because we can bring in a tax, we can release some of those properties to the market. Otherwise, we have to look at what is really going on. Why have we suddenly, and it is suddenly really, got this massive property bubble that has occurred? And there are other reasons around it. One of the reasons, and I think Senator Mezek will agree with me, is we closed down over the last 20, 30 years slum conditions for many people, where we had 6 people living in one room with a wash basin sharing a toilet amongst other rooms in very, very antiquated lodging houses. And we did away with those. When those are done away with, people have to find other places to live. So they'll tend to hire a house, rent a house, and use all 4 rooms, one person in each room. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason over the last 30 years that we've seen that very few people have considered is the divorce and separation rate of couples has gone through the roof. Thus, in the old days when you had a family unit that stayed together forever in one house, one place, you suddenly need 2 houses. One for the person who's been displaced and the other for the rest of the family. All these things need to be looked at. And that's why with Deputy Tadier bringing that, we can really perhaps start to look at what is happening. Not mythological, yes, it's the population, yes, we've got thousands of empty properties. Let's really have a look at the facts. And I believe this will help to dig down on the facts, some of which Deputy Guida was probably 100% right. I haven't looked at the breakdown, but I know the statistician said that he wanted to dig down to see exactly what that figure constituted. And if we pass that, that will be a good step on the way to doing it. Thank you, sir.
Constable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. This proposition means well. However, it's about as much use as a chocolate teapot. This will put lots of pressure on the parishes and their rates committees in order to identify empty properties. Do we just identify dwellings, or do we include empty outbuildings? Because storage is also in demand. There are reasons that properties are empty. It could be a family dispute. It could be that the owner cannot afford to bring it to a standard in order to let it out. There may be other personal reasons. This is an example of government interfering unnecessarily in people's lives. Empty properties will not solve our housing crisis. It would be like emptying the sea with a teaspoon, tipping it into a bucket, then emptying the bucket back into the sea. If we are serious about addressing our housing crisis, both for a first-time buyer and rental, then we need to build to satisfy demand. We had that option a couple of weeks ago with the interim island plan. This Assembly chose not to rezone fields for housing, so we have still a housing crisis. This Assembly has to solve the housing crisis. It is difficult. We have a population problem. The world has a population problem. It is easy to solve if your name is Putin. You just eliminate people. We have to build. The world changes every day. This island changes every day. We cannot dwell on the past. We can't sit in a bubble that was yesterday. NIMBYs are stopping us moving forward. An election coming up doesn't help either. We need to aspire to the majority requirement, not the NIMBYs. We need to build. It's the only way to keep this island viable, to pay our taxes, to pay our social security, and to guarantee our future. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Southern.
Yes, sir, and I'll speak but briefly. And what makes me rise to my feet is the speech of Deputy Guida, because he made an excellent speech, giving coverage to some of the reasons why we might have a housing crisis. However, his speech was entirely mistimed, because it was a speech that was appropriate in September, perhaps October, when we see the report that says 4,000 homes empty at any one stage for the following reasons and what might be done about that. So information gathering, absolutely essential to any decision we make, followed by, on the basis of that information, the action plan that needs to deliver some answer to this. And in particular, our housing crisis. Now, there'll be many people out there thinking the problem is solved and welcoming this statement, this proposition, entirely appropriate proposition, because it says, let's analyse the problem, let's find out what's wrong, and let's see if we can find mechanisms, reasonable mechanisms, of mending that. So entirely appropriate to a debate in September or October when we see the conclusions as to what information we have at our fingertips. And that's entirely, and Deputy Tadier must be lauded for that, entirely the right approach to this issue. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Senator Vallon.
Yes, thank you, sir. I just want to applaud Deputy Tadier for doing his homework in terms of the report of the proposition. And the reason why I say that, and because it feels like deja vu, and I've not been here as long as some other members in the States Assembly who have seen time and time again consultation reports, reviews, and nothing come of them. One thing that isn't mentioned, though, in the report is, of course, the property tax review that was carried out in 2014. Probably not the ideal time to carry out a property tax review just before an election. And I'm sure many of us will remember the former Treasury Minister tearing that document up at Hustings in Trinity in the 2014 election then. So there was a consultation done with that. And one of my issues with consultations and reviews that we have with the states is we spend a lot of money on consultants and people coming in to tell us whether it's an economic perspective or how it will or will not fit Jersey, or and sometimes it's not tangible, or it's not right for that particular minister at that particular time, or them council of ministers. And in the consultation that we did back in 2014, and I've heard it mentioned in speeches today, was around what we discussed in the island plan. And it actually stated in the summary of the responses of the consultation that there were references that property taxes should support the priorities of the state's island plan 2011, including efficient use of scarce resources and bringing into prompt use land zoned for development to provide adequate housing. And that was response back from the public in terms of a consultation. But then what happened with that consultation was, well, we'll do some things, but there wasn't really any action plan or timelines that sat against that. And now we are here discussing property taxes, essentially, again. And there is an argument, and it has been a long-running argument in the states of Jersey, around the need to diversify our tax base, and that we're too reliant on one particular tax, and that actually we should be looking at spreading that equally so that we are sustainable in the long term. And so when Deputy Tadier is asking us to request the Minister for Housing and Communities, or whoever that may be in the next term, I hope that whoever carries out this work will take into account the work that's already been carried out in terms of property tax as well, in conjunction with this, to look at the possibilities and actually modernising and improving, particularly the areas around where it was mentioned our rates requirements. There has been some trepidation over what we do and how we do that over the years. But this was carried out 8 years ago, and property values have substantially increased since then, sir. And we don't actually know the differentiation in terms of the vacant properties, although it has been identified from the 2001 census, you know, that breakup of what that may or may not look like. And we know that other jurisdictions quite capably do this. I fear that when we request a minister to carry out a piece of work, that with the next council of ministers, whoever they may be, it may not be prioritised to the satisfaction of the Assembly. And I think it's also important that if there is any consultation carried out, which predominantly is a requirement of tax, bringing in new taxes, it is a requirement in our long-term tax policy, that consultation is done in a clear and transparent way. There was an argument that wasn't done last time. And also that what comes out of that consultation is action, is timelines for bringing things in if there is an agreement to do so. And I would recommend that any members who aren't members of the Council of Ministers to keep a very close eye on what falls out of this work, to make sure that it is joined up. Because the problem with bringing in one particular tax, it has a knock-on effect to other areas and economic effects. I'm not saying I don't agree with this. I think it is one part of a solution of an issue we've got with regards to housing in Jersey. And that's why I applaud Deputy Taddier, as he's been asking questions about this for a very, very long time in this Assembly. And I wish whoever is in the Council of Ministers next term good luck with carrying out this work, especially with the timeline in terms of bringing this forward. And I hope it is created as a priority and looked at in conjunction with work that's already been done before. Thank you, sir.
Councillor St Peter.
Thank you, sir. Very quickly, I'd like to thank Deputy Taddier for bringing the proposition. And I'd just like to clarify with regard to the parish rates. I have long thought that the parish rates would be a good mechanism to deal with unoccupied properties. I only have to look at the situation I have with my student property in the UK. For the 1 month it's not occupied, the council chair charges me a fairly hefty amount for that single month when it's not occupied by the students. And it would not be an onerous thing for those on the rates committee. It would simply require, the rates are calculated on a snapshot at 1st of January every year, and in fact the owner at that point remains responsible even if the property changes ownership throughout the year. And in the same way, in fact, when I considered this, I thought we only needed 2 extra lines on the rates form. Is the property occupied or not? And secondly, why is it unoccupied? And from that, the rates assessors could determine the rate for that property. If the property subsequently was occupied, the owner could contact the parish. Alternatively, there's a right of appeal. So that there is nothing onerous in having a different rate for an unoccupied property. It simply requires a law change. I say simply, probably not that simple. And I'm sure that most of my colleagues, the constables, would support such a move. So thank you very much.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Senator Mezin.
Thank you, thank you, sir. And of course, I wholeheartedly support this proposition and what it's trying to do. The only point I wanted to make from it is to just examine the wording for what it's asking the Minister to do, which is to look for an effective mechanism to discourage domestic properties from being left vacant for long periods. And that's quite specific, because that's focusing on a mechanism that would at least try to stop this from being a problem in the first place. It's not worded to say to the Minister, find a mechanism for getting empty properties back on the market. Those are kind of different things. One's focusing on before something becomes a problem, and the other would be focusing on fixing something when it's become a problem. although it could be a byproduct, if you were to look for some sort of surcharge, then that of course would incentivise people who have empty properties to put them back on the market. The reason I'm pointing out that distinction is because the Minister has spoken about this no-use empty schemes in the UK, about providing financial support to people who have empty properties to renovate them or whatever to get them back on the market. And I just point out that that type of scheme isn't what this proposition appears to be asking to do. The Minister's obviously free to look at that if he wants to, but I don't think that we should see that as the mechanism, because it does have problems. It can have problems in that it, in some instances, might incentivise people to actually keep properties empty for longer so that they could get a more favourable loan to renovate it rather than going to the private sector, which is what they ought to be doing in the first place. And depending on the detail of that kind of scheme, you might reasonably argue that it's not good value for taxpayers' money when, if there's a pot of money available, it might be better using that to support shared equity purchase for first-time buyers, and that would certainly be my preference, than it would be to use that funding for people who own properties that frankly haven't looked after them properly or haven't disposed of them when they should have disposed of them, and that kind of scheme might actually prolong their involvement in a market where they may actually just not be somebody who's suitable to be there. So that's the only point I wanted to make that clear distinction, that that kind of scheme is clearly not what this proposition is asking him to look at. So by all means go ahead and look at it, but don't consider that to be a substitute for what the proposition's actually about, which is about mechanisms at the start of a home potentially being left empty for too long, and there are better ways to deal with that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm delighted to welcome His Excellency, the Polish Ambassador to the United Kingdom, to the Chamber this morning. I hope members can welcome him in the usual way. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Councillor St. Juan.
Thank you, sir. Having turned my microphone on, it's good to remember to put it back on again. I also stand to applaud Deputy Taddeo with this proposition. I think we have a housing crisis in this island, and the figures tell us that there are 4,000 empty properties, but I think we need to pay careful attention to what Deputy Guida said. I think if we put on our bets on this resolving a large chunk of our housing crisis, sadly, I think, and given the breakdown of the figures he's given us, we are going to be bitterly disappointed, because I think a lot of those properties will be empty for good reasons. That doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't do something about it. And I, for one, will be supporting this proposition because I think it's important that we take action. Those properties are empty and could be filled by people, and that the owners could make an effort and put them back on the market. I think they should be persuaded to do so. But I think it would be a mistake to say that this could be a quick and easy bullet to shoot the housing crisis solution, because I don't think it is. I think when we scratch under the surface, we'll find, as Deputy Guida has pointed out to us, there are some very good reasons why properties are empty at the time of the census, and those reasons will probably resolve themselves. I mean, if I think in one's context, I can think of 4 empty properties, one of which is being rebuilt substantially, 2 of which are subject to a long and very lengthy legal debate over the ownership of the property. It hasn't been resolved in 10 years. And frankly, I think when they lower me 6 foot under, it probably still won't be resolved, and the houses will probably have fallen down by that stage. Now, whether having an empty property tax is going to resolve that, I would wish to speculate. But nevertheless, and the other property is in the process of being rebuilt and will come back on the market shortly. There are other ones, but we're continuing to do our research. One other point, I think it's important that parishes can help with this. I think other councils have made this point, and we stand willing to do so as and when this comes into legislation. And we will see what happens in September, what support we're required to give. But we stand willing to help. We have the mechanisms to do it. Parishes, more than anyone else, know who lives where and which properties are rented out and which are owned by people. So we are very capable of helping with this. So in short, and I won't prolong this debate for much longer because I think I've yet to hear anyone speak against it, so we must be close to getting a vote, I would hope. I intend to support this, and I congratulate the Deputy on bringing it forward. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, I'll call Deputy Tadeo.
Thank you, sir. Try not to put this too precariously and injuring anyone. It's difficult to be able to see, though. So what I'll do is I'll start off with the comments of perhaps the only member who I think at least partly spoke against, or at least expressed some concerns. That's probably a logical place to start in some ways. I want to say that I think Deputy Guida is right in many ways. There aren't 4,000 long-term empty properties in Jersey, and that's not what I'm saying either. But what the census data has told us, and we've been told time and time again that the census data, the Statistics Department is an independent body, and that it provides information, the best possible quality information that it can at any one time, and it of course qualifies that. And we all look forward to being able to read properly around the census data in the full report when we're allowed to see it, which is no doubt sometime after the election. But let's wait and see. But the point is, on census day, there were 4,000 empty vacant properties that were identified. And in 2011, there were only 3,100 empty properties that were identified. And that is much more. And even in 2011, the scrutiny report that we did, and it's probably a good time to say, in my attempt at brevity in my opening speech, I forgot to acknowledge the membership of the panel. So it was the Deputy of St Mary, and it was Deputy Martin and the Constable of St Helier, the current Constable, who were on that. And it identified that the vacancy rate in Jersey was much higher, for example, than in the UK. Exactly the same vacancy rate, and there will be all of those, that whole spectrum of reasons why properties are left empty, but it's still higher. So there's this idea that Deputy Guida said, and this is probably why I start a park company. He says it doesn't make sense to leave a property empty. I completely agree with him. It doesn't make any sense to leave a property empty because it's not being put to good use. There's a potential loss of income there. There's certainly a loss of income, especially if you're leaving it empty for a long period of time. And it doesn't make sense morally, I would say, when you've got local families, you've got people across the whole of the market that are looking for somewhere to rent, to buy, somewhere affordable, somewhere decent, and they're just not getting that. Nonetheless, it still happens, even though it's painful, as the Deputy says, because humans aren't always rational. First of all, there are lots of things that people do that don't make sense. There are lots of people who still smoke, for example, and it's fine if you want to espouse libertarian, if you want to smoke, that's fine, but you know that you'll be much more likely to die younger and perhaps with chronic illness if you smoke. If you drink to excess, you will have much more likely have problems than if you don't do that. Yet, being humans, we sometimes overindulge and we do things that don't make sense because we're not always rational and we're not always reasonable or logical. And if you add into the mix the fact that life is very complex and that there are competing pressures, so you might inherit a house, for example, and find out that you don't need the rental income, but similarly you don't have the time or resources to put into the property because you're doing 1,000 other things in your life. And so properties potentially do sit there empty year after year. And it's those properties that we need to identify. And although it would have been perhaps a clumsy analogy to make, the point is, if we take smokers, for example, if you have a jurisdiction, a country which has a low amount of smokers, you will get a correspondingly low amount of deaths due to smoking. If you have a country where there's a high amount of smokers, a high percentage, you will get a high amount of people who end up dying from smoking-related illnesses. It doesn't mean that all smokers will die. And you can say, well, I know some very healthy smokers. They run marathons, etc. But that's not generally how it works. So the bigger the pool of vacant properties there are, the more likely there are to be long-term vacant properties that can be put onto the market. So when Senator Valois just spoke and said this was a well-researched proposition, I thank her for those generous words. It's well-researched because it's based on the work of a well-researched scrutiny panel piece of work, which I happen to be lucky to be part of, and it's something that we all wanted to look at, and it was part of the a housing review, the supply of housing review, and this was just one of those recommendations, and I think it's one of those recommendations which should have been the low-hanging fruit. Back in 2015, a clear recommendation which talked about a 7% vacancy rate in Jersey. What does that 7% mean? It means that out of all the properties that are available in terms of homes, not just for rental, 7% of them on census day were vacant. That's gone up now to beyond 8%. And our advisors, and we looked at all the evidence, and it says if you can just reduce that from 7% to 5%, then you're going to put 800 new homes onto the market. Now, the way I look at it, yes, of those 4,000 properties, it may well be that 3,000 of them are going to be back on the market within 2 months, within a year. They're being done up, they're being sold, whatever. Similarly, of course, there will be other properties that are being used which won't be being used, which are not captured. So there are swings and roundabouts. But if we were to be fairly generous and say, for a start, there might be a quarter of those properties which could be put back. That's 1,000 homes in Jersey which could be put back into use, which are not currently in use. That's 1,000 homes. They could be just units, or they could be actual 3 bedrooms. We don't know. That could save us rezoning green fields. And I think that's the key point here. You might even say 25% is too much. Let's go even lower. If it's just 10% of those 4,000 properties which actually can be, we can affect change on, that's 400 new properties that can come back onto the market without any fields needing to be rezoned. That's what we're talking about today. So yes, the Treasury Minister says it is a snapshot. We do need a well-rounded picture, and that's what we're asking for. And I would welcome an investigation into second homes. And I don't think that what she's talking about, or what any future minister will be talking about, is taxing a second home which you own in Jersey, but your main residence is in France or in Portugal or in Poland, wherever that might be. Because I think we're talking about Jersey properties and multiple ownership within the island. And I think there is a piece of work to do that, especially when it comes to scarcity. And I think that's the point. Nobody, I think, in this Assembly wants excessive government intervention. We all respect the fact that property is a human right, and that there's a presumption against any government or against state intervention and meddling in your private property rights. But that is not an absolute right. It's one that has to be balanced against the fact that we do, I think, have a housing crisis. And whilst we might not universally agree that we're in a period of housing crisis, when you're looking for a home and you've been served notice, I had somebody call me, in fact, just yesterday, somebody in St Saviour with difficult circumstances who's going to be looking for a home, and it's not going to be easy for them to find it. We all realise that those people are very much in crisis when they get their eviction notice or their notice to quit. I do agree with my Constable of St Brelard who talks about the surcharge. So I don't think he mentioned the surcharge per se, but within the parish system, there is already a mechanism. For example, if you put your rates in late, if you pay them late, there's a 10% surcharge. And the Connétable of St Lawrence also talked about the fact that it might require a change in law, and it no doubt would, but that's certainly something which will be in the gift of the next Assembly. The Deputy Morell talked about the privilege of owning property, and certainly it can feel like that increasingly in Jersey. So many people, I think, now feel lucky, especially if they've bought in the last few years, when they look at the state of the market, the state of the lending from banks, and you've got people who have got lots of money. In fact, they earn lots of income, and yet it's increasingly difficult to even get a loan to be able to pay the bank back over a long period of time for the privilege of living in and potentially owning your own property. So we all know that. I would take exception, in fact, that it could be slightly pedantic, but it's not a privilege in Jersey that everybody has the right to buy. You have to live in Jersey for 10 years. So in the meantime, there are people who are trying to aspire to home ownership in 10 years' time, yet they look at all these properties that are sitting empty. They hear the statistics from the census, and they think, what is this government, what is the Assembly doing for me? And today I think we can take that action. Interestingly, it just came to me whilst I was speaking, and I will beg members' indulgence. I hope it's not the case, but this is, of course, potentially my last ever proposition in the Assembly. We can't take anything for granted, and I do want to make sure I get all of the points on record, sir. I hope that's not the case, and I hope that I can be here to hold whichever minister to account in the next Assembly. But, of course, none of us know what the future holds, sir. The point is, the chairman of that scrutiny review also spoke, and I thank him for that. I've enjoyed working with him over the past few years, and especially on that particular review. I think that's the point. It was based on evidence, and it's important that when we again interviewed the Minister for Housing in 2017, we were also given promises about action, and here we find ourselves 5 years later. Now, there's this idea that somebody said to me, well, you know, we could just resolve this by having a word with the owners. We can find the owners, find the family, go and speak to them and find out if there's an issue. And I would again use an analogy that came up in the past. It's perhaps slightly clumsy, but that of feeding seagulls, because it used to be the case that many of us would have constituents come to us and say, there's this person behind me who's feeding the seagulls. It's an old lady, and I don't want to tell her to stop feeding the seagulls. And the idea was, well, let's maybe send someone around from the parish to have a word with her. And then, of course, sometimes that works, but other times you're just going to get the door slammed in your face because you say, well, what business is it of yours? It's like, I'm allowed to feed the seagulls. Is it against the law? No. Well, sling your hook then. I'm going to carry on feeding the seagulls. If you want to start having those conversations about why is this property empty, it's really important to have a legal and lawful backstop where you can say, by the way, do you know that if this property is left empty for longer than 2 years, for example, for longer than 5 years, you will be facing a potential increase in your rates, a surcharge or a potential tax. Oh, well, I better do something about it then. It becomes much more in focus. If you've got relatives who you're in the middle of a dispute with because you don't know what to do with that particular property, the fact that you might get a letter, you might get a tax on that particular property if you don't resolve it by the end of the year, that will also focus the mind to say, actually, we better sell this property. We don't need this hassle of any administrative problems coming up. We do need an effective mechanism, and as my colleague Deputy Ward said, and the other key 2 words in there are long-term. So this is to address not a problem that doesn't exist. This is very much to find an effective mechanism to address a problem that does exist that we need to know more about long-term empty properties. I don't want the Assembly to be here in 3 years. I don't want to be here in 3 years asking to approve and rezone greenfields or even brownfield sites with greenhouses that could be put back into agriculture, that could be turned into community allotments, saying we have a housing crisis when no action's been taken on this. And I would say to the Constable of St Mary's, whom I very much enjoy listening to, I don't think we're a million miles apart in this, because if it comes back in the next island plan that we've still got a very large shortage of homes and we do need to rezone greenfields, I will look at that very carefully. But if we haven't taken action in this regard, with all those empty properties that could be put back into the market, and there could be some in St Mary's, there could be some in St John's, there'll be throughout the whole of the island. Isn't it great to see that property which used to have those posters on? We all know the one as you come from St Peter to St Mary's through to St John's, and it used to have some politician's name on the front of the house saying, thanks to these people, I've not been able to do my property up. Now, that is being done up. I don't know the full story behind that. I don't know the reasons. But when I go past there, I think, great, at last, somebody's being able to be allowed to redevelop that property and it will be a home, hopefully, for a family who can enjoy it. I think that's great, and hopefully it'll be done very soon. So government interference is what he also spoke about, and rezoning greenfields is government interference. When we rezone a green field, we're interfering in nature, we're interfering in the ecosystem, we're interfering in the long-standing rural tradition that the island has enjoyed. It's also telling our owners what they have to do with that particular field. We're saying that now, it used to be a green field for agriculture, you have to build on it, we expect you to build on it. It could have been used for cows, for potatoes, for any kind of crops in the past. And I'm saying that let's do that only when all of the other options have been exhausted. So I would say to the Constable of St Mary's, I'd like his support in this. I agree with him that we do urgently need to build more homes for local families, and we should also be open to importing flat packs and building them good quality homes, cheap, also on state-owned land, on parish-owned land, but it shouldn't be, it's not mutually exclusive. I think we can do both of these points. I thank other members who have spoken. The Constable of St Peter, he sees very much the rate system as the potential. I don't want to be prescriptive in this, but certainly that seems to me also to be one of the obvious starting points. So let's say, for example, how this could work. A return comes into the parish on the 1st of January or for the 1st of January 2025. You say, okay, that property's empty. All right, we'll keep an eye on that. 2026, 1st of January, it comes back, it's still empty, and it's got the same reason on it, between tenants. So you immediately think, okay, between tenants for 2 returns, so it's at least been empty for 1 whole year, potentially for 2 years, and they're still in between tenants. That can't be right. That's a home for a local family that isn't being used, and that's the point at which the mechanism could kick in. And if there's a good reason for it being exempt, great. If there isn't, then I'm afraid there's a possibility of paying a surcharge or an additional tax on that. And I thank Senator Mezek also for the work that he's done, I think, preparing this. So the Housing Minister spoke early on. This is work that is being undertaken. There is an initial date of September. So I think that brings me towards the closing part of the proposition. And I thought of a way to finish this appropriately. So I know that Deputy Ward likes musical quotes. I know that some unnamed officers in the Assembly also like musical references. And I thought, what better than to think about a country and western song at this sitting of all that one might quote from. It's from 1954, and it was originally by Rosemary Clooney, written by Hamblin was the name of the writer. I don't have his first name here. And as often is the case, the writer's forgotten. But we probably know it more as a Shakin' Stevens song from 1981, which is more of a pop version. I particularly remember it, and I've got mixed feelings about this song, because for those of us who are at Lekena School, I don't know if you remember, in the old school there used to be a keyboard room. The music room was lined up with lots of keyboards around the outside. And what passed for music tuition back then, and I'm not saying there wasn't some good elements to it, there weren't some good elements to it. It's a bit like PE, isn't it? It's hit or miss. If you're good at PE, you're probably going to do all right. If you're not good at PE, then you just got to grin and bear it until you can get to your French lesson or whatever it is. And no doubt the same happened for music tuition. You were effectively put in a cubicle with a pair of headphones,
I think Deputy Tadier.
I'm getting to the point, sir.
I think if you could speed up to the point. You've strayed so far from the points that...
If you like, sir, I've strayed so far that the only way is back now, so I'm not going to stray any further. It's a bit like just a minute, isn't it? It's a digression. Just an hour. And I think Mel, who's the new, is it Mel, she says, okay, we want to see where this is going, so I'll allow it to stay with Deputy Tadier, but we'll award the Greffier...
I've not said that, though.
We'll award the Greffier the point, nonetheless. But the subject of affordable housing stays, or as it is, the song. Okay, the song is called This Old House, so I remember it there, and I had to struggle to play this, not because it was a difficult piece of music, but just because the speed was so fast. It was like 200 beats per minute. And the only way to really do it is to record it and then speed it up and play it back. Okay, I digress. The words of that song, to quote the writer, This old house once knew my children. This old house once knew my wife. This old house was home and comfort as we fought the storms of life. Fast forward to the chorus. Ain't gonna need this house no longer. Ain't gonna need this house no more. I'm not singing it, by the way. Ain't got time to fix the shingles. Ain't got time to fix the floor. Ain't got time to oil the hinges nor to mend the window pane. Well, in that case, sell it to somebody who has got the time. Sell it to somebody who's got the resources to be able to do that, because we all sympathise. We know the fact that this house once had your children. You've got lots of good memories there. You grew up there with your wife, your husband, and we know that it was a comfort to you, and we know that it might have been in your generation for a long time. But the fact is, you ain't got time to fix the shingles, or the floor, or the roof, or the windows. So let somebody who has got the time and the resources to do that. And if the current housing minister wants to set up an intricate scheme to help you pay for that, fine. I think just the simplest option is let them sell the house to somebody who's got the resources and the time to do it, and let a new family move into that house, sir. So I maintain the proposition and ask for the appel.
Thank you very much. The appel is called for. I ask members to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the vote and members online to vote using the chats. Does he want to wait till after? All members have had the opportunity to cast their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Proposition has been adopted, 41 votes per, 1 vote contra.
The Conotub of St Mary voted contra.
Your song wasn't enough, Deputy Tadier.
Very well. The next item of public business is Hustings Filming, P49. The main respondent is the chair of the Privileges and Procedures Committee, and it's lodged by Deputy Masson. I ask the greffier to read the citation.
States are asked to decide whether they're of opinion to refer to their Act of 6th of November 2013, in which it was agreed, amongst other things, that conventional hustings meetings should be web streamed, and to request the Privileges and Procedures Committee to film hustings in parish halls at the next and subsequent general elections, rather than only film proposed online hustings, as is currently suggested.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. I bring this proposition quite late in the day. As we know, the nomination period is approaching very quickly. As we know, we've introduced a new Jersey Electoral Commission system, authority even, system, and some time ago, if members have been following my written questions, I started to probe just to want to make sure that things were in order. And I started to ask about the hustings process. Now, just to be clear, because I think there have been some red herrings set and placed, not by me, but by others choosing to interpret all of this. So what is this proposition about? This proposition is about the centrally allocated resource from the State Assembly, from PPC, from the GREG, regarding the resource that is allocated to the filming of hustings during an election period. So today we are talking about that allocation of resource, not whether hustings should be online or whether hustings should be in person. That's not what my proposition is about. I need to be very clear about that from the beginning. This is about the allocation of resource for the filming of hustings. Now, back in 2013, I, alongside Deputy Martin, Deputy Herissier, and some other members, did a review of the Public Elections Law and the election process. And one of our recommendations after that was that hustings should be filmed and put online. The reason for that, it was to enable people who couldn't attend, whether they were working or were disabled or whatever reason, weren't able to go. It was to give them an opportunity to be able to view the hustings process in a time more convenient and practical for them. And technology has obviously moved on since then, but at the moment, that's where we are. We brought it to the states approved that recommendation, and resource was duly allocated for the next elections. So, sir, just to remind members, of course, what is the purpose of hustings? Why do we have hustings? I think it's firstly important to remind members that hustings are, of course, the responsibility of the candidates. There's no official rules kind of governing how they work or how they're to be done. They've evolved in convention over the years to a format and locations. But the purpose of hustings for many people are to see how candidates can perform. So, for example, can they deliver a speech in public? Can they speak clearly? Can they speak eloquently? Are they able to make their point concisely? Of course, it's also an opportunity for candidates to raise their profiles. And of course, the other aspect of it is the ability to be able to answer questions where perhaps it's on a subject which candidate is less familiar with, or to understand how they can perform. So that is the process, and it's important to remember all of that, but it's the responsibility of the candidates themselves. There is just this extra resource which was allocated by the states for filming purposes. So I started asking some questions to PPC to ask what was going to be happening in this election, because there wasn't really anything on the vote.ge website. And that's simply because, as a candidate in the past, it's been my responsibility as senior deputy in my district to arrange a hustings meeting. You know, I sort out the venue, I sort out the permissions, I get the equipment, etc., etc. So I needed to know what was going on. So members will recall my question of the 21st of February, where I asked the chair whether the Jersey Electoral Authority has decided how many hustings for each electoral district will be recorded and paid for centrally. In particular, how many will be provided for in St Saviour's, comparison with 3 hustings that were provided in the parish previously. If no such decision has been taken, why not, and when will the decision be made, and whether the organisation of hustings remain the responsibility of the candidates. Now, the answer from PPC was that the plans for recording hustings are subject to final approval by the Jersey Electoral Authority. It is expected that one filmed hustings event, I repeat that, one filmed hustings event will be arranged for each of the 9 constituencies and also for each of the 12 parish districts. Historically, these have been filmed physical events, usually at a parish hall. This year, however, the intention is to use the State's Chamber to host an online hustings for the 9 constituencies, the deputies, and each of the 12 parish hall constable. It is anticipated that candidates might still be keen to hold in-person hustings at parish halls or other locations. If candidates in St Saviour or indeed any other constituency or parish wish to run additional events, they are very welcome to do so. The Jersey Electoral Authority will publish when they are taking place via vote.ge, but it will be a matter for candidates to plan and manage those events themselves to meet the cost between any sound equipment or filming which may be required. The decision has not yet been made, as the Jersey Electoral Authority has only recently been formed, and it confirms that the hustings are the responsibility of candidates and participation is optional. Now, of course, this was a new method being proposed, and also this changing of the resources, of course, hadn't come to the States Assembly. So I go back and I ask another question of PPC on the 7th of March, and I asked the committee, further to the written response, you know, what was the rationale for changing the filming arrangements offered for hustings? What consultation, if any, was undertaken in reaching the decision of the filming arrangements? Whether the change was identified as a cost-saving measure, whether the committee's assessment for not offering localised filming for hustings is seen as a reduction of a service to the public, and why the decision was not brought to the Estates Assembly for debate. And it's quite a lengthy answer, so I'm not going to go through it. But the nuts and bolts of it were PPC wanted to try a different method, and which they thought was more cost efficient and was COVID proof after an experiment with the by-election for the Constable of St Clements, and due to COVID reasons, which one can understand at the time. But they do also confirm that there was no formal, what did they say? There's no direct consultation in relation to the filming arrangements apart from the Jersey Electoral Authority. So, sir, this change was just kind of produced with kind of no explanation to the public or for candidates to know what was going on. And even when we refer to the comments of the PPC, which further come out, again, I understand that the chamber may not now be an option to use in this, that there's been no clarification or public statement from PPC to explain actually what they propose. Where is the venue? How is it going to work? If you look at the comments as well, it could be this and it could be that, but we don't know exactly what it is. And we're a couple of weeks away from the nomination process where people will then have to start booking their slots for hustings meetings. It's all a bit confused. It's not very clear. All the guidelines really should have been on the vote.je website so candidates know what they'd be signing up for. We still don't know. And then when we dig a little bit deeper into the comments from PPC, they then say, oh, well, okay, well, we're going to carry on with our programme anyway and offer what we're going to offer. But then if the states want to agree with my proposition and, reinstate what the States Assembly had kind of already agreed to, then that's an option as well. So I have no problem if we have different options for candidates to choose what they think is most appropriate. But I do think that candidates should have the option of having the traditional method filmed and streamed. Now, just to clarify for members when they're looking at the wording of my proposition, whilst it does say web streamed, I just want to be clear that basically, in my interpretation of that, means recorded and then put up online. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a live thing which is interactive, etc., etc. Basically, I'm looking to reinstate the status quo for candidates. And I pointed out that under the proposal of PPC at the moment, the offering is just one filmed husting per district or constituency. And in the comments to PPC, of course, when I'm asking about the hustings process and what's being proposed, what isn't produced is, of course, kind of the governance around the whole issue of these online hustings, how a question is going to be vetted. So, for example, and how to, if we're saying it's a responsibility of candidates, and the candidates, of course, can then decide, well, what are the rules, what we're going to do? So, we're used to the conventional ones of, well, we kind of expect them to be electors within the district to give them priority. Well, how is that done and verified online when people do that type of thing? We hear from the comments of PPC, well, it's just going to be on trust, it's a self-declaration. I mean, with a party process, I'd also want, as a candidate, I'd also want someone to declare whether they're a member of a political party, because if we're going to go online where anyone can just fire in as many questions as they like, and so what's the process behind that? Because, you could have one political party or another lobby group or the media just, firing a load of candidate questions in order to give an advantage to one particular candidate or another. And that whole kind of vetting process. Now, I know the comments of PBC, well, it's all self-declaration at the moment. But again, when you're doing it in person, it is easier, not foolproof, but it is easier to identify whether someone is actually a resident of the parish or not. How do we do that online, and are members comfortable with that? So, sir, just keeping this brief, what I'm asking members to do is to reinstate the resource which the States Assembly agreed at the time, because there wasn't an alternative at the time, so that candidates who have physical hustings, whether that, whatever location they choose to, that the resource for that to be filmed and put online is maintained in order so that members of the public have the opportunity to be able to view them later on in case they couldn't attend those meetings. That's what my proposition is seeking to do. I try to be as concise as I can, and I hope someone in the Assembly seconds it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. First, let me say I'm really sorry I'm not there. I'm in isolation and I'm really trying to get in before the end of the week because who knows, as they say, who knows. Yeah, going back to the proposition, sir, in hand, I was very surprised, and I do think Deputy Masson telephoned me, and we sort of went back in our memory and found where it was, and we knew over the last few elections the rules, etc. And you've been allowed to pick one hustings that's been filmed, as you say. It will then be web streamed and been really, really well received by the public. I just think going completely online in a virtual setting, and as one who has done Meet the Ask the Minister through, I think it's sort of called Sligo, where people just keep piling in, you don't know who they are. This has gone down like on social media, and it keeps going down, sir. For the public think we are now afraid to meet them eye to eye. Absolutely not. We want to meet them eye to eye. We want the facility to choose, and they might be in certain districts. I say St Saviour's is now a whole parish, and they'll probably have more than one hustings. We always have two in District 1, St Helier, which is now District South. But I just think this is just one step too far for the electorate. About us, about the new candidates, this is one step too far, sir, for the electorate who are used to. They know normally where to go. They want to see the candidate. They want to test the mettle of the candidate. And somebody said to me, a hustings will never win you an election, but can by jolly lose you an election. It is about their interaction with your public, the people you are asking to test you for the next 4 years. I really, sorry, this is part of my COVID. I've got a sore throat and not much voice. I really, really do ask that we just keep this one, at least for this election. We get behind Deputy Masson. It's not asking too much. It's keeping the status quo that has happened for the last at least 2 elections, might even been 3, and by-elections, senatorials. Every senatorial was filmed in every parish, and extras that were done at the RJNH, etc. So it can be done, and I just really believe we do this for the public of the island. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy St Peter.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm totally supportive of this. However, I would just like to ask Deputy Masson, I think I heard him say there'll be one recorded or videoed hustings per district. I'd just like to draw attention to the fact that the parishes, certainly where I have not yet formally declared, but I will, in St Peter's, St Mary's and St Wands, I think they would like to have a husting in each individual district and each individual parish, and how we come to agree, which I believe will be the candidates will agree how the hustings are formed or whatever, how we would agree which parish hall, for sake of argument, is chosen will be all but impossible, and would let down the other 2 parishes if we were only allowed to do it in one. So I just would like to ask, I don't know how I do this, but to ask Deputy Masson to push forward to say that each parish should have its own hustings. Thank you, sir.
Will the member give way for a point of clarification?
Well, I'm sorry, this is your proposition, isn't it, Deputy? In which case you have a right to respond, unless you're asking for a point of clarification. Thank you. Unless you're asking unless you're asking a question of the Deputy of St Peter about his speech, because you have a chance to respond.
Well, indeed, sir. It is a question on his speech, which is when I mentioned that, is the Deputy aware that I'm talking about the comments of PPC? It's them setting the one filming hustings, not me. Is the Deputy aware of that?
I noted. Thank you, sir.
Well, does any other member wish to speak on the Deputy IE?
Thank you, sir. Yes, it's very important to read the proposition clearly, and it states that to request a Privilege and Procedures Committee to film hustings in parish halls. And I'm a little disappointed that the Deputy has not included other areas of St Helier. For St Helier North, we do not have hustings in the parish hall. And for St Helier Central, we do not have hustings in the parish halls, only for St Helier South. So therefore, I will not be supporting this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Conor Talbot, John.
Thank you, sir. Unlike the previous speaker, I will be supporting the proposal, but I do share his concerns about the mention of parish halls. We should be doing everything we can to increase voter turnout at this election. Our record on voter turnout is very, very poor. The best I've achieved managing a campaign, sir, is over 80% in a by-election, and I hope to return to levels similar to that in the future. By not filming the hustings and not enabling those people who are unable to attend, either because of their diaries or the physical capacity at the venue, is really a backward step. I'm encouraged by some of the things that the new Electoral Commission has brought forward, such as postal voting, making it easier for every member of the public who's registered to vote. But I do encourage them to accept this proposal because we have to, as I say, do everything we can to encourage more, not less people to participate. I would encourage members to support this, whether it's at a parish hall, a community hall, a hotel, wherever the hustings take place. I would question the proposer, sir, in his assumption that his responsibility as the senior deputy to organise hustings is up to the candidates as a whole to organise hustings, not an individual who nominates him or herself. It's up to the candidates in the district to organise their own hustings, and none of us have favour over that. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Conor Deputy Abbey.
Well, just to answer the last speaker, so that the convention is for the senior deputy to organise, to get penciled in the parish hall or the town hall, in my case, months in advance, so that they have, so that those dates are blocked out for the hustings, and that's why that convention, because it's way before the nominations are out, and we know all the candidates, and that's why that convention, that tradition has happened, so that we get, the parish halls aren't, or schools aren't all full up, and there's nowhere to have the hustings. So that's quite a good tradition. So there are times in the theatre when you can't even give tickets away. None of my productions, of course, but one or two. But seriously, if you're on the Edinburgh Fringe, giving tickets away is actually a thing to do. You're chasing a finite audience, and there's thousands of shows, and it's better, you've got to perform it anyway, so it's better to have a crowd in there. Perhaps we'll go out and talk about your show. So you're giving out free tickets on the Royal Mile like confetti. And most of them won't be used by people. They won't turn up and take their seat, even though it's free. If you're lucky, 20% of the tickets, free tickets you've given out, they might turn up and see your show. And they generally are the worst audiences you will ever play to, because they haven't invested. They haven't self-selected, made a choice, bought their ticket and invested in their evening at the theatre and want to go and have a good time and respond. And so it's rather depressing. And I think we want to make, obviously, we want to increase our turnout, we want to make the elections as easy as possible to participate in for the elector. Of course we do. But there are some occasions when we rely on the voter to invest, to make some effort. One is to actually turn up in person and vote, or now fill out the postal forms and vote in that way. So that's made it a little bit easier. It's not much of an imposition, but we do ask for a modicum of effort, and that's why I probably think voting online may never happen in terms of just being able to log in and actually vote online. It may be that in the future that is secure and possible, but is it desirable? Because is it too much to ask from the electorate just to make one little bit of effort? And the similar thing is with the hustings. The hustings in person at the school or the parish hall or the town hall are very valuable because everybody who's going to them has made the effort, chosen to do so, made the effort to do so, and is there to ask questions and hear the answers, and is investing in the process. And that is really good to hear and really good to see. It's good to be participant in that, both on the floor and on the stage. And it's really important that we preserve that and we encourage that and we keep that going, because it's absolutely vital. And the online hustings will not replace that. They should not replace that, and they will not replace that, because attending an online hustings, of course, it requires less effort, doesn't it? And less investment. So I just think that what I'm saying is that we should support this proposition and we should preserve this very, very important tradition. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Deputy, does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Senator Pallett.
Sir, I wasn't going to speak on this. I was actually just going to support it, but after the last speaker, I just want to say a few words. I don't criticise PPC in any way. I think they've done an incredible job over this term, and I think the Chair's done an incredible job as well. But it is important that as many members of the public get to engage with the electoral process. It's one of the few times that the public get an opportunity to engage with their states members. And I'm not criticising states members. States members generally are accessible to the public, but this is the one opportunity when they do get an opportunity to meet them and engage with them. In saying that, and the words that Deputy Labby used was modicum of effort. And we've all got to make an effort in the election. We've got to make an effort to go knock doors. We've got to make an effort to make sure we've got our leaflets ready. And Deputy Labby suggesting that the public should make a modicum of effort to turn up at a parish hall or community care or wherever it is. Well, that is important, but I think what's more important is as many members of the public get to view and have an opportunity to engage with. Now, engagement can be a lot of things. It's not just about turning up at the parish hall. We spent the last 2-3 years working virtually, and we've had to work in that environment. Not all of us are comfortable with it, and it's not the best way to work. But I much prefer people had an opportunity to see a hustings meeting live streamed so that they can get an understanding of what the candidates stand for, watch them interact with each other without the necessity of going along to the parish hall or community care or wherever it is to be able to do that. So I support Deputy Massell in what he's attempting to do here. I hope the funding's available. I'm sure the Chair PPC will ensure that it is, but it is important that as many members of the public get to see the hustings, whether it's in person or whether it's live streamed. And it's not just about filming it, it's about live streaming it so people have the opportunity from sitting at home. There are some that won't be able to access the parish hall for all sorts of reasons. I'm going to be talking about carbon neutral roadmap soon. Why are we making people drive to a parish hall to watch something when they can just as easily watch it in their armchair at home? Still participate with it. So the more opportunity, the better. And I support Deputy Massell's proposition, and I hope everybody here is going to do the same. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Conor Tarbison-Brillard.
Thank you, sir. I rise to speak in once again in support of the proposition and say, I suppose we've got it easy in St Blas in that we are an autonomous parish, but we've got two effective districts in the old sense. But we will be, and I've taken it upon myself to try and put in place hustings meetings as before. There'll be two in the parish hall, deputy constable. There'll be two in the northern part of the parish, once again for deputies and constable. And to date, sir, I can assure those standing that the one at the parish hall will be on the 8th of June. We have to move. If it's left too late until after the nomination meetings, it really is difficult to get bookings, as alluded to by a previous speaker. And I think as councillors generally will be supportive of trying to facilitate these meetings in whichever way we can to encourage turnout, as has been mentioned. So I would urge other constables to try and get these dates in place as soon as possible so that those standing can get them in their diaries. Thank you, sir.
Conattab, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you. So very swiftly. First of all, I personally believe in face-to-face engagement, and this is the preferable for me. So I am in favour of Deputy Marsden's proposition because I would like to see hustings with physical presence and meet the electorate. Saying this, we all need to remember where we've been 2 years ago, and we never thought that states will be online, and we did it. So going forward, we need to see, and this is the reason that I wouldn't go just against the PPC because they've done an amazing job. And the option to have hustings online, it's another option which is extremely important. And to be honest, if people who would watch filmed hustings, they can also watch online hustings. That's more or less the same media. So it's something to consider as we are going forward. I have two questions, and I'm not sure if it's if Chair of PPC or proposer can address. We all stick with wording of the proposition, and as Deputy Ayer mentioned, it's written at the parish. The question, if we approve this proposition, they said that we'll be filming, 1 filming, 2 filming, 3 filmings, whatever the decision will be made. After approving this proposition, can we, I mean, personally, as a deputy, if I approve this proposition, does it mean that we need to have hustings if we decide to have hustings only at the parish hall, or the PPC would consider flexibility and we will have possibility to have it anywhere that candidates will decide? And it is important to understand for me this, as per proposition, it's only in the parish hall and it's not good enough. Second question, and it's raised by Deputy of St. Peter. Some constituencies have 3 parishes. In St. Helier and Austin, St. Helier 3 and 4. In St. Helier 3 and 4, we had 3 hustings. It was the biggest district. Actually, district will be smaller than it was this time that was before. We had 3 different areas and we have 3 different hustings. So if it would be given a consideration to the constituencies that have 3 parishes, would the same consideration would be given for the big districts of St. Helier to have more than 1 hustings? Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Just briefly, I'm absolutely going to be supporting this proposition. I just want to clarify one thing that Deputy Labby said, sir. As far as I'm aware, the convention is certainly in St Lawrence, so the convention was definitely not that the senior deputy organised the hustings, but certainly I was never asked to when I was deputy, and because the parish very kindly looked ahead and had it in hand, sir. That's always been my understanding and expectation. Expectation, wrong expression, but it was always very much appreciated. What I would just say is that it's the parish halls and the Conatabs have always facilitated that as a provision. I think that's common sense. For me, it should definitely be for all hustings. Slightly disappointed we're actually having this debate because for me, I thought it was a given. And frankly, the feedback I get from parishioners is that certainly members of the public I speak to, want to see the ability of candidates to stand up in front of 100 or 200 people and deliver a coherent speech? Can they do that? If one does it, for example, and I think there's been rulings, sir, but if I had been in this assembly virtually, yes, it's a different position, but you're not getting that live audience. And that is part of our job. It's our ability, and I won't go into the merits or not of what our various capabilities are, but it's that ability to stand up in front of the public and deliver, sir. And anyway, so for me, the hustings from that perspective are very important. It is always a matter usually for the candidates, but I hope so it is facilitated in all constituencies. So, for example, I would assume that where, for example, there are 3 parishes or however it's broken down in the constituency, I would anticipate there will be 3 hustings, sir. And in fact, I'm reminded of many years ago when on scrutiny we did a review into, I can't remember what the matter was, sir, but anyway, it was probably around constituencies, thinking about it, and we had 1 meeting in each constituency, and I think the one we went to was up in St One's for St Peter and St Brillard's, and we had complaints that why we didn't go to St Brillard's because it was so far away from St One's, and for me that demonstrated the sheer point that actually, sir, I suspect, particularly in the rural parishes, I suspect in all parishes, there'll be an expectation that there is a hustings in each of the parishes that form that constituency, and I think we need to be facilitating that, sir. So I absolutely will be supporting this proposition. Thank you.
Chief Minister, Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. I know the point's already been made by Deputy I apologise I wasn't here to hear it, but it was my initial reaction when reading the proposition was that not all hustings take place at the parish hall. It's really important to remind ourselves as well, because I know Deputy Masson's talking about PPC changing the provisions, but hustings, it might have been said already, so sorry if I'm repeating, but hustings are a matter for the candidates to organise. There's no obligation to have any hustings. There's no obligation to have a particular format for hustings. There's no obligation to have a particular venue for hustings. And there's no obligation, I don't think, for a particular way of recording, streaming, or disseminating a broadcast, whether it's live or pre-recorded. That doesn't mean, of course, that we shouldn't do any of those things. But I do remember quite distinctly my first experience of theory and reality at the 2018 senatorial hustings, where there's a room of 21 candidates at the town hall. And of course, you say, well, what are we going to do about the hustings? And understandably, with 21 potential politicians and some pre-existing ones, you're not going to get any consensus about what to do. And the chair of the Comité de Connétable at the time, I won't mention any names, but I remember him distinctly, would say, it's obviously a matter for you. You don't have to have any hustings. And there was a big debate, of course, about should we have 12 parish hustings, plus the other 3 that you do, the rural hustings, and then maybe a school hustings. So you're looking at 15 hustings back then in a space of a few weeks, which is a good way of not leaving yourself any time to knock doors or go out and meet the public in reality, but that's an aside. And of course, the wily old constable would produce a list of paper, but saying, but if you did want to go with our plan, we've already booked the dates for you. So you can have St Lawrence as your first one on the 10th of May. You can have, it wouldn't have been May back then, of course, it would have probably been September, right down to whichever was the last one, the town hall. The town hall was, as the Irish would say, great crack. It was always the best one. It was raucous, and I remember some of the candidates who started off in the parishes, and you could see, I won't mention any names, but one of them would say something which was a little bit, that's not going to do him much favours. And there'd be the occasional smirk, because the country parishioners were always very much like polite and okay, yeah, we'll be civil, but we've made our mind up based on what you've said. What's it, the old adage, you can't win an election at the hustings, but you can certainly lose one, was what the people who came to see knew. And back then, of course, there was no streaming, no broadcasts of that. By the time it got to the St Helier hustings, and of course, like every election, the establishment, they're all rubbish, we've got to get rid of them, we're going to have proper change here. And so when it came to St Helier hustings, when the same line that had been trotted out over 11 plus the country hustings was trotted out in St Helier, they just completely roared out with laughter. And because it was so inappropriate and it showed that that person was so detached from reality, and he didn't do very well. That's a potential fate for all of us, of course, and I don't want to cast judgment on that. So the point is that there is a bit of a myth here, and why has it taken such a long time for a proper process to be put in place? That's not any criticism of the current PPC, because they have very much grabbed the bull by the horns. But we need to get to a point where there's a prescribed format, and also it shouldn't be the responsibility, I don't think, of any candidate to have to pay for the privilege of standing for election. They already have to do that indirectly by producing information, circulating manifestos, and then you pay for the privilege to get lots of stick for the next 5 weeks and potentially for the next 4 years after that, just for doing what is ultimately a job of public service. But, the public are entitled to their opinions. So what is the solution here? I think it makes sense if a hustings in each constituency is broadcast. I'm quite relaxed about how it is broadcast. I don't think it necessarily has to be live streamed. I don't think live streaming is necessarily the best way to do it, because as we know, when it comes to our entertainment, and I'm not saying that hustings are necessarily the highest form of entertainment, but people like to watch things on demand. You might not be available to watch a live streaming at 7:30 when it happens. It might be actually disproportionately expensive to live stream it just for a handful of people who might want to watch it live because they can't get down to the parish halls. But you might want to watch it again, which you can do by recording it. And I suspect if you're going to live stream it, you'd automatically record it. But if you're going to record it, you don't need to live stream it. That's the difference. So you can watch something again. But why are we not looking at audio streaming? If I'm out in the car or listening to my radio at home, I might want to listen to any questions on Radio 4 rather than necessarily watching Question Time, because I don't need to see the faces. And surely audio streaming is a good way to do that. So if it's not possible to broadcast all of the hustings, why are we not at least audio streaming them so that people can listen to them as podcasts when they want to, maybe when they're out walking on the coast with their dog, when they're driving along in the car, listening safely to the radio, if they're putting it through that, or just at home when they want to, sir. This shouldn't be beyond the wit of woman. So I'll be very interested to hear what the chair of PPC has got to say on this. I am disappointed that of the prescription that this should only apply to parish halls, because what if the parish hall isn't the most obvious place to broadcast a hustings from? I'm hoping that in St Belards, for example, we not only have the traditional hustings at the parish hall, that we also have one at the brand new Lekenove school with an amazing hall, which is probably set up for AV, and I'm sure they record stuff there already, and you've got a place where you can fix a camera, and you've got the audio facilities to have an excellent broadcast, an excellent recording, or an excellent audio recording if we go down that route, rather than necessarily, and this isn't any disparagement to some of the old and listed buildings that we've got at parish halls, and putting that responsibility perhaps even on some of the small parishes which don't have the infrastructure to be able to do that. And many, of course, of the people associated with the parish will be doing that voluntarily. So is that fair? Is it proportionate? Personally, I want to support the principle of this. I think as much openness, as much broadcasting and dissemination of our politics as we can have is a good thing, but ultimately engagement requires a will to do so. And I go back to the point that when there is a hustings, you will see that people who want to be there, often the elderly, the people who want to be there, will get down there even if it's difficult for them. Same as on election day, people come out because they want to vote traditionally. That doesn't mean we don't need to cater for other people who want different ways to vote and to engage in our process there. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from the chair of PPC to find out what's a sensible and measured approach in all of these things.
Deputy, does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I was prompted to speak by Deputy Tadiak because I too had the experience twice of the Senatorial Roadshow, and his experience
carried on for a good number of years and how unsatisfactory it was. And I remember one election where one candidate felt so cheesed off with the ineffectiveness of the process, they presented a cardboard cutout of themselves at every one of the hustings, which obviously he didn't get elected, but nonetheless I think making the point that with, trying to find better ways of communicating with people at election time is really, really critical. And, I think, very much I'm supportive of the intention behind Deputy Masson's proposition, but I would go further. Having had experiences of using online streaming, certainly in the last few years of COVID, I have made sure that planning inquiries and so on, and have had online streaming of those events. That's been expensive, but I have to say it's been, I think, a massive, massive benefit for being able to communicate what goes on within government. And I would be going further. I think there are many parts of Jersey's government life where we should routinely do those things. For example, if I was remaining as minister, which I'm not seeking to do, or to remain as a member, I would be looking at planning committee meetings in future should be online streamed. I think there was an attempt to do this during COVID, but nonetheless these things should be routine. And I absolutely share members' views that it shouldn't just be in parish halls. So I would say online streaming wherever possible, and certainly recording, filming, because as Deputy Tadier says, if you do online streaming, you automatically record it anyway. And yes, the use of audio. It is expensive, but this is an area that we should not economise at all. So, I should be supporting the intention, but I think we should not spare any expense in this area to ensure that we assist every means possible that people can form informed opinions about the candidates and put them forward. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Alves?
Thank you, sir. And I've listened intently to everybody's contributions, and there's been various points that have been repeated along the way. And I just want to make this first point very, very clear. It was never the intention of PPC or the Grefia or Vote.je to not have physical hustings. Okay? There has been numerous members mention that throughout this debate, and that was never, ever going to happen. And I just really want to make that clear, because this proposition is not about bringing back physical hustings. Physical hustings were never going to go. This is about whether or not we film every single physical husting. That's what it's about, okay? What Vote.je and the Grefia had decided was that instead of filming every single physical hustings, they were going to offer an online option. And that would be the one that would be filmed instead, and that would be for each district and each constable election. Now, so obviously this boils down to, I think, how members feel about the cost implications. I've just had a look at the YouTube videos that were posted up from the filmings of the hustings in 2018, which anybody in this chamber can do right now if they want to. And on average, each deputy's hustings has a viewing rate of about 400 views. That's 4 years on. Okay? So I ask members whether to, PPC either way are not against this, we're not supportive, we have basically just been factual in our comments. And I'm just adding another thing for members to consider, whether it would be cost effective, considering that many debates in this chamber take part where we often talk about how the government wastes money, whether things are cost effective or not. We never wanted to discourage voter turnout at all. In fact, quite the opposite. And I actually have concerns that if people read the comments, which I understand, our PPC comments were published, were delayed in their publishment, but it does say quite clearly there that it will cost approximately £30,000 to film one hustings in each district, and we won't be pedantic about the wording of Deputy Masson's proposition. I just want to make that clear. Obviously, he does say parish halls, but we are aware that some districts don't have a parish hall that they can use. So obviously, we won't be pedantic about that. And what is in the comments paper? The comments paper is only 1,000 words, and many members could have actually read that in the space of a few minutes during this debate and answered a lot of their own queries. Just saying. So, I've lost my train of thought now. So yeah, we never wanted to discourage voter turnout, but that is about £30,000 that could be used in other initiatives to increase voter turnout that won't be used, that will be used to film hustings instead. And like I said, unfortunately we were delayed in publishing our comments, but I just want to make that clear that obviously PPC, we're not against it, we're not for it, we are just stating the facts in our comments. So I think just to summarise, because I don't want this debate to go on much longer, and I think I've made everything quite clear. The online offering was given as an alternative means of engagement, and it was a way to look at maximising the use of the budget that we have for public engagement. So I would like to thank Deputy Masson for raising this as an issue, as it has raised the profile of the hustings process. And I'm sorry that so many members have misunderstood, but it was always PPC's intention to increase access to these events. But please think carefully. This will have a cost implication, but if the Assembly decides that this is what they wish to happen, then we will make it so. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak on the proposition? Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Masson to respond.
Thank you, sir, and I thank all members who have contributed and for the passion that many members have spoken about the importance of the electorate having the chance to have an informed opinion regarding their choice of candidates. And I thank the comments on the chairman of PPC. I just want to make clear that in any of my communications, I've never spoken about, the doing away with physical hustings. For me, it's always been about the allocation of resource, which are provided centrally. And I'm also thankful for the contribution of the chairman of PPC. Because of obviously the deadline of having to get my proposition in, the term parish halls was part of the proposition. Yes, it should have just been venue, because obviously the candidates will choose, and I'm delighted that the chairman would seek to be, or the Vote.ge team would seek to be as practical to support candidates in their choice of venue for their hustings, should this proposition be supportive. I think what this proposition has done, however, is kind of shown the importance of consultation with these types of things, simply because, again, to address confusion, but also there have been some practical issues raised about the number of hustings, how many we're going to have per district, all these types of things which are out of my hands. I can't, this proposition obviously doesn't deal with that. It's just about how the filming resource is allocated. I do know that there is a process, if members are worried about the cost, I do know that there is a process that, of course, the GREF can approach Treasury for extra funds in order to manage that process, should that be necessary. So I thank members who have spoken, so yes, I mean, I agree with Deputy Tadia. I did in my opening comments talk about the hustings being the responsibility and choice of candidates there. So I think that, as many members have said, including Senator Powell, this is about trying to open up the election process to as many people as possible in order to allow that engagement process to happen. So given that we've got a very heavy agenda, I won't go on any further, and I will ask for the appel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members participating remotely to vote in the chat in the usual way. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. Proposition has been adopted, 34 votes pour, 7 votes contre, no abstentions.
Thank members for their support, sir.
The 7 who voted contra were Senator Valward, Constables of St Mary and St Martin, and Deputies Guida, Lahegre, Aye and Pershard.
Well, the next item of public business is the Code of Practice, a revised Code of Practice for engagement between scrutiny panels of the Public Accounts Committee and the Executive, P50, lodged by the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition. Firstly, there is an amendment lodged by Senator Valois. President, are you accepting that amendment?
Yes, we are, sir.
Very well. The President accepts the amendment. Do members agree that the proposition can be read as amended? Very well. I ask the greffier to read the proposition as amended.
States has to decide whether opinion to approve the revised Code of Practice for engagement between scrutiny panels and the Public Accounts Committee and the Executive as set out in Appendix 1 to the report. Accompanying this proposition, except that in Appendix 1, A, before paragraph 14, there should be inserted the following paragraph with the subsequent paragraphs renumbered accordingly. 14. Within the first 2 weeks of each calendar year, the Council of Ministers will provide the Scrutiny Liaison Committee with a schedule for that year of policy and legislative priorities with timelines for their completion. B, in paragraph 35, for the words consider providing, there should be substituted the word provide. C, in paragraph 47, after the word states gref, insert the words in advance of its provision. D, for paragraph 66, there should be substituted the following paragraph. 66, ministers, brackets, chief officers, accounting officers, in the case of PAC, will provide updates to the Scrutiny Liaison Committee every quarter on progress and implementing accepted recommendations, including their status on any tracker that is maintained and the reasons for any delay that may have been incurred in their implementation. And E, for paragraph 73, there should be substituted the following paragraph. 73, where the issue cannot be satisfactorily resolved, the Privileges and Procedures Committee will be notified of the impasse and will determine the appropriate action based on information provided by ministers, stroke accounting officers, stroke the Chief Executive, and the Scrutiny Liaison Committee in accordance with the requirements of this Code of Engagement.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, this proposition is lodged in accordance with the Scrutiny Liaison Committee's roles and responsibilities. It has been lodged and proposes to update the current Code of Practice for engagement between the scrutiny panels, the Public Accounts Committee and the Executive. The proposed updates result from a collaborative process with the Chief Minister and the Council of Ministers. It might be noted too that updates are also being made to the Scrutiny and Public Accounts Committee proceedings, the Code of Practice, concurrently with this proposition. Although modifications to the Proceedings Code don't require Assembly approval, for transparency purposes, they are attached as an appendix to our report and will come into effect upon formal presentation of that revised code to the States as a report, which we intend to action this week, subject to the successful adoption of this proposition by the Assembly. Members might have noted the proposition is largely a housekeeping exercise with various updates to outdated terminology. Specifically, the number of titles referred to in the current code, which are now redundant, such as the current title of the Chairman's Committee to the now Scrutiny Liaison Committee, in line with P72 of 2019, which this Assembly adopted, amending standing orders to replace the term chairman or chairman to chair. The administrative arrangements for scrutiny's access to the Council of Ministers supporting agenda papers. The current section is updated to better reflect the practical arrangements that have evolved between the government and scrutiny function to exchange information since the code's introduction, which is accelerated by increased digitalisation and the adoption of the Teams platform. And beyond housekeeping matters, P50 proposes that ministerial decisions are made available to scrutiny simply on a more formal, consistent and timely basis than at present. Furthermore, the committee is grateful for the engagement of Senator Valois with us in her efforts to lodge an amendment to this proposition, which the committee is happy to accept and supports in full. We acknowledge, however, that the Council of Ministers has produced a comments paper detailing that they're favourable of the amendment except the proposed amendment to paragraph 35 in respect to the provision of the minutes of the Council of Ministers to scrutiny panels. But as this proposition has now been read as amended, I'm sure the Chief Minister will speak to his points, but I do hope the Assembly will adopt this proposition in full. So in conclusion, the committee would like to thank the Chief Minister, the wider Council of Ministers and their officers for their consideration and input into the updated code. And while we're content to propose the proposition as amended, the position of the Council of Ministers may differ, as I've just said. Whilst we appreciate the Council of Ministers' desire to maintain their practice in keeping a private minute of their meetings, as Senator Valois articulates, confidentiality is dealt with in the Engagement Code and therefore ought to be a reassurance to ministers.
Is the proposition seconded? Does any member wish to speak? Chief Minister.
So it's not actually to speak for the moment. Can I just seek a clarification? Apologies. Yes, procedurally I've made an error. Are we able, on the amendments, the proposition has been taken as amended?
Yes.
As the chair of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee has identified, there is one element the Council Ministers do not support. I'm presuming so on the basis it's been taken amended that we can't identify that particular element to vote on separately if the chair of the SLC was so minded. That was the clarification, sir, and I do apologise.
If this is a legislative provision, the answer is no. The answer is yes. You could require any separate legislative position to be taken separately. However, this is a proposition, and it depends, to my mind, on whether the paragraphs of the proposition can be taken separately as a matter of construction, and secondly, whether the proposer would agree to do so, because that would be within the gift entirely of the proposer.
If I may, sir. As I expressed in my speech, the proposition has been read as amended, and I propose that it's...
Well, then you would not be prepared, even if it were possible, I haven't yet considered that, you would wish it to be taken as a whole.
I would, sir, thank you.
Well, that's within the control of the proposer.
Right, sir, on that basis I will not be making a speech, sir. I've procedurally made a mistake. We obviously do not support the principle around the minutes, but I'm not going to vote down the Code of Engagement as a whole, sir. So on that basis, and I have an engagement to go to, sir, I will let the debate proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Minister. Senator Valois.
Yes, thank you, sir. I think it's important that I speak on the basis of the amendment that was made to the Engagement Code, and to what I was going to thank the Chief Minister and the Council of Ministers. I probably shouldn't now. But as it's amended, actually there are two significant things that I want to refer to in my amendment. One, if you haven't already read it as members or any future members of the States Assembly, is the work done by the Democratic Accountability and Governance Subcommittee, R23 2022. A significant piece of work, a lot to do there. There wasn't sufficient time to bring much of that work in due to deadlines for lodging propositions, and much of it would have required legislative changes. So I took the opportunity to insert one of our recommendations in the Engagement Code, but I'm hoping that actually there'll be an amendment to legislation next term, whoever takes up the toll of doing the work on Privileges and Procedures Committee, in the respect of the Council Ministers having to report to the Assembly and keeping updated a policy pipeline. we have had issues, and it's been an ongoing issue, and I think it's because ministerial government is still in its infancy. But actually, ensuring that the Council of Ministers have some form of idea of what's going to be produced during each individual year enables scrutiny to properly organise their working function to do the appropriate amount of scrutiny around those pieces of work. And ministerial government only functions when you have effective scrutiny. And actually, if we didn't have scrutiny, I would suggest we get rid of ministerial government. That's my own personal view, and I hope it's many others' points of view. But actually, when they work together, they are extremely effective and can be very good for the public good, which is why we're here as States members. And there are compromises that have to be made, whether it's in policy or in legislation. And hopefully that's based on fact and information. So what this particular amendment will do is ensure that there is a pipeline that's updated and that there is a priority relayed to that pipeline so that we ensure that there is good organisational structure, preferably in the Council of Ministers, that will then follow through in terms of how scrutiny will function alongside that. So I'm grateful that the Council of Ministers were supportive of that part. And that actually the Scrutiny Liaison Committee have accepted the amendment. The other part, of course, I'm also a member of the Public Accounts Committee, and we did a significant piece of work on performance management in the States. Just to say a thank you to the executive team in the Government of Jersey with developing the recommendations tracker. Anyone that wants to understand what that recommendations tracker is, I have referred to the CNAG report R190/2021 that provides further context to it, but actually what it will enable us to do is follow up on recommendations of the CNAG and PAC, but also PAC recommended that scrutiny recommendations should be considered as well. That will hopefully, again, better organisation, better follow-up, better implementation, and better dialogue, I believe, between both the executive and non-executive. So those were the two main areas that I really wanted to make sure that were amended. The others were more of a kind of clarity position. There were some things I read where I wasn't sure where it was going to go after a specific reading of a paragraph, but I understand where the Chief Minister's coming from in terms of his concern. He's been on exactly the same line when it comes to minutes all the way through this term. But so I've served on scrutiny majority of my time in the States Assembly, and I've seen extremely effective scrutiny when you understand the appropriate context around how a discussion has been made. And scrutiny has confidentiality agreement in this engagement code with the Council of Ministers to ensure that those minutes are not released, and I would hope nobody would release them. And the same goes for the executive, to be fair, sir. I think historically we've seen whether it's policy development papers or minutes of meetings or confidential documents actually being leaked. And that's not right. That shouldn't happen at all. So we are responsible for ourselves as members, but to each other to respect what confidentiality means. But we also have to respect the fact that we're the public, we're the representatives of the public. The Government of Jersey are the public sector, and it should be used minimally to create this confidentiality around things. And I think we need to be more open and understanding around having a context of what discussions were taken, whether it's at the Council of Ministers or whether it's on a policy development board, around how a policy was developed or the way that a decision was taken, can sometimes actually save a large amount of time around the scrutiny of certain pieces of work, or actually it can take that scrutiny in a different direction. So I would ask the Assembly to please support the proposition as amended. Like I say, I'm disappointed that the Chief Minister has taken the position that he has. He's well within his right to do so. But I ask that the whole States Assembly recognise that we want to learn from what's happened and what's gone on before and how we can work more as a team rather than as executive versus non-executive. And I think this will enable us, well, enable the future Assembly to take that on board, and hopefully we'll see a much more collaborative working between the two. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Yard.
So I rise to support Senator Valwa. Senator Valwa and I have worked together on numerous occasions looking at what we can both do to improve our system of government. And later on, we're going to have a debate about about my private proposition, about changes that we might make. But here I think we've got a core proposal which really addresses the issue of the importance of scrutiny and government working closer together. I don't share the views of the Chief Minister about the protection of information. I'm for transparency and openness, and I think by doing that it builds trust. It builds trust and eliminates unnecessary conflict. And if people break the rules by publishing bits of information they shouldn't do, which cause prejudice to government, then they are accountable for that. So I don't think we should be afraid of that. So I won't be in government, I won't be in the Assembly, but I absolutely believe, and shortly I'm going to be proposing why I believe there are other changes that we can make to government, that I don't think that government, ministerial government is in its infancy. It's now in its teenage years. It is 16 years ago. And I think it's time we learn the lessons of how we can change it. And so we must not allow these personal tensions and issues to get in the way. Right, you know, I'm not a detailed person here, but there's a number of things I'm very pleased to see in this. I've always thought that we are far too chary about not disclosing ministerial decisions. I believe that all ministerial decisions, unless they're on legal matters, should be available openly and publicly and transparently. And I'm disappointed that I found as Minister that that's not the case, that we still keep on being told, oh, you know, we don't publish this because we've got exemptions. Really pleased that we've now got a disclosure of all of those. Unless hopefully I'm not misunderstanding this document, but I think that's what it means. And how scrutiny respond to those is to them. And I think it is important that there is this kind of checking on progress. Because I think there are issues within government that I'll be addressing myself, whereby, you know, how the government itself or within ministers' system, how that is working, which is outside. But there is no question, if we are to maintain ministerial government, scrutiny was always the solution, and it's become more and more important. And it means that we get greater inclusivity of members, that there is ownership and buy-in, that we aren't divided. Now, I agree we've got this issue of party politics, which is likely to get in the way, because I think the kind of vision that I've said, I think focuses on what I might call independence and a consensual view. But you know, that's for the future. But at the moment, where we are now, I think we should support this. It's a good move, and I have no reservations about it at all. Thanks, sir.
Thompson John.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to echo the comments of the previous two speakers. Senator Valwa talking about the need for government and scrutiny to work together. We are, after all, elected to represent the public of the island, not one section, but the public. I've continuously pressed for stack minutes to be published in a timely manner, just like Deputy Pamplin has. The competent authority minutes have been delayed in circulation. We've just heard the Chief Minister talking about his reluctance to publish minutes of the Council of Ministers. There's a theme, sir. There's a theme. And we heard Deputy Young talk about trust. Well, what we need is more trust. We need to get away from the them and us. We need to work together. So at Easter, one of the books I read when I was on holiday was called Conflicted by Ian Leslie. I'd highly recommend that book to everybody in this assembly. It talks about why arguments are tearing us apart and how they can bring us together. So if people haven't got time to read the whole book, I would urge them to read the paragraph around give face. Disagreements become toxic when they become status battles. The skillful disagreeer makes every effort to make their adversary feel good about themselves. Back to trust. And I really do urge people to look at that. We need to make decisions, sir, for the island and islanders. Not for them, not for us. I hope the next PPC, sir, will look at training for members, because I feel there's a great lack in training for leadership, team working and decision making. And I hope together with this new code, those things will help the next assembly be far more productive. Thank you, sir.
Much Connotar. Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. I didn't really intend to speak, but because of the, I'll just say faux pas at the beginning, because I was going to speak up and say, no, we don't want this taken as amended, sir, because I know the council, and especially I'm one of them, who has concerns about the part that we're all discussing. Now, I say this, sir, because it does go both ways. Many years ago, and I've done scrutiny much more than I've done ministry, so don't think this is a one-size-fits-all. I said, well, why don't scrutiny have all their meetings in open? You know, not just public hearings, the hour or two we have, preparing, etc., reading through the evidence, why don't we do that? Oh, sir, you'd have thought I'd have said I was dragging us out and doing, you know, something really terrible. But the absolute never. We need to have, you know, discuss and who's going to question who and why and what. Absolutely, then I got it, sir. I thought, yeah, you're probably right. You need a bit of privacy. And so does council, sir. And I'd just like to say, I'm speaking because I'm telling you I'm voting against a whole lot because I'm not allowed. The senators decided we're going to have one vote. I need to tell you why. It's because we've all got our hats on today, haven't we? We've all got this council, this government, this scrutiny, this PAC. In very, very short months, sir, we'll all be different. We don't know we'll be here. It was very interesting earlier debate when Deputy Tadeo, I really, we don't always agree politically, but admire the way he works, said, I hope I'm back so I can scrutinise and hold to account the next government. No, if the Deputy's back, he should be in the next government, sir. This is keep your hats off and keep it how you really want to be. I can't vote for this. You've got to, wherever side you are on, and I'm sorry we're all working together, but you make a policy, someone's scrutinising it. You do something under accounts, PAC scrutinise it, the CAG scrutinise it. So it was called, sir, critical friend in the beginning. I've had friends that criticised me over the years. They're ex-friends now. So it is a bit of, you know, give and take. Very sorry I can't support it all because I am literally throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but the senator says she won't take that one article or one part separately, so I'm voting against the lot. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I won't be long, but I read this amendment with disappointment. Disappointment because I found after I'd read it that this is what should be happening anyway. We shouldn't be needing to put it down in words. This is how scrutiny in government should operate. There's very little more to say, sir. I've worked with the good senator on scrutiny in my early days in this assembly, and we always worked as critical friends. We took government propositions and saw where we could make them better. We accepted propositions that we thought were good and couldn't be changed. We weren't in opposition. We were just trying to do a better job for the island. And I think As I said at the outset, it's disappointing that it's come to this. If we've got to put this down in words, well, so be it. But for me, it's a shame it's come to this.
Most deputies, any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Senator Pallett.
Again, sir, just following my party colleague, just very briefly. I think, like many people, want to see transparency, want to see openness, and don't want to see secrecy. That's what the public are beginning to say to me more and more and more, is they want to understand how decisions are made. Now, I think what we're asking for here is we're not asking for the panel, for the Council of Ministers meetings to be verbatim provided to the public. They are to be provided to the panel PAC chairs, I think, to understand how decisions were formulated. And I think that's a reasonable way forward. Deputy Martin talked about holding scrutiny meetings in public. Well, we don't have Council of Ministers meetings in public. And again, I don't think we should have scrutiny meetings in public. But I have no reason whatsoever, or I don't believe that there should be any difference between what scrutiny provides government and what government provides scrutiny. So I think scrutiny should provide more detailed minutes to Council when requested. I have no issue with that. I've really enjoyed the last 18 months on scrutiny. It's been, I've got to say, one of the most enjoyable periods I've had in the last 10 years, because the scrutiny process is far more advanced than it was 10 years ago. The quality of the officers within it are of high calibre and extremely supportive of us in terms of the work that we do. But we do need openness. There needs to be, I think that's what's caused so many problems during the last 4 years, is the inability of the executive and the non-executive to talk to each other and be open with each other. And this for me doesn't take it too far. I think like Deputy Young, I think it sets the right tone. So I will be supporting this. I do hope Council of Ministers really think hard before they vote against this, because I don't mind, if I'm fortunate enough to get elected again next time, and whether I'm working in scrutiny or in government or wherever I am, I want to be seen to be open with the people I work with, be open with scrutiny, or if in government, be open with my non-executive colleagues. So please support this. This is not a step too far. It's absolutely setting the right tone.
Deputy Massell.
Thank you, sir. It's an interesting debate, and forgive me if I haven't quite grasped the detail of this amendment, but I was on scrutiny for 9 years, and it was my understanding that we could always request the Part B minutes of a Council of Ministers meeting anyway. So I'm not clear what is the argument about what we're trying to change, because it's my understanding, and we were always able to do it, that you could request the Part B minutes from the Council of Ministers meetings anyway, and officers regularly flagged ones that we should see as things went along. On another point, just about openness and transparency, I remember in my first term, I think it was under Deputy Higgins when he was chair of the Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel. We went, as new keen members, embracing openness and transparency, and that's what we wanted to do. So we started holding our planning sessions in public. We had a member of the public who attended before a scrutiny hearing with a minister, and before the hearing was held, all our tactics and everything was published online by that member of the public before we'd even had the hearing, which could be argued kind of scuppered everything that we wanted to achieve during that hearing. So there are times when, in order for states members to carry out their functions properly, they need to be able to have meetings in private in order to achieve what the public need them to do. And I know not everyone's going to be happy to hear that, but we can be undermined as well. And I think members just need to bear that in mind. So I'm seeking that point of clarification about what the difference this change actually does. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Conor Tyberson-Brillard.
Thank you, sir. And in standing to support the amended proposition, I'd just like to make a couple of observations on the Council of Ministers' comments. My experience is that minute taking actually is quite an art form in itself, and I'm very grateful that we have very gifted officers in the GREF that do that. What we mustn't do, sir, is put the onus on those officers to have to interpret what minutes are or what the content of meetings might be. And actually, sometimes if it's too complicated, it becomes unreasonable. And I think the level of minutes that is produced by the scrutiny committees, panels, is perfectly adequate. So maybe that's an area that the Council of Ministers may wish to review. How much of it needs to go actually in a minute is only really the fundamental points. We have experience, I'm sure many councillors have experience at parish level as to how minutes might be taken, and we certainly try and keep them simple. So I would ask the Council of Ministers just to consider how they might take minutes in the future. During the upcoming session, they may look at it in a different light. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Colin Tubbs. Any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. Reading through the comments, it's quite interesting that a lot of the well-rehearsed arguments that I've also faced in the past when trying to get the Council of Ministers to be more open, and I remember Deputy Truscott will also remember, we've both used the phrase which I think we espouse, not just in words but in practice, about trust. Partly, I think, because there's some alliteration there and it helps with the posters, but also because we believe it. And so I very much have always maintained that we should have trust, transparency and teamwork in this assembly, whether it's in our little groups or whether it's in the collaborative way that we approach. And I very much welcome the recommendation for that book from the Constable of St John's. I think a lot of these are not new concepts, but it's about how we take people along with us. And if you read the comments there, I can understand some of the arguments. They were the same arguments which we used when we had freedom of information as a law come forward. And the arguments were basically, well, what this means is if states' emails are subject and ministers' correspondence are subject to freedom of information, we'll just find other ways to get around it. And they'll say we'll start using our own private emails. We'll just have conversations in the corridors rather than actually having them open around the table. Is that really the starting point, the defensive mindset that we want our ministers to have? Because if that's the way, that they're much more capable of finding ways around the actual underlying principle about how to be open and transparent, rather than actually starting off saying, okay, well, we want to be as open as possible with you, notwithstanding the fact that we do need to make decisions and speak open and frankly. The bottom line is that the 2 points are not mutually exclusive. It is possible to have frank, robust, open conversations in groups, whether it's in a party, on scrutiny, in the Council of Ministers, on ministerial working groups, and yet still provide meaningful, good quality information to those who are doing the scrutiny work. And I think that's exactly the point, because politics isn't like a science. It's not like a mathematics where there is only a right answer and a wrong answer. There are lots of different ways to address different questions. And in order to find out whether government is doing the right thing, you need to look at the workings. You need to say, okay, tell me what your thought processes were, whether it's on an A agenda, on a B agenda, in a public scrutiny hearing around the table, so that you can look to see what points have been discussed. And if it gets to the point where you say, okay, look, all of our decisions are really going to be made on the B agenda and the A agenda is just a piece of theatre, or take it a step back, one step back further, we're not even going to make the real decisions on the B agenda because we know we'll need to tell you about that. We're going to make them in the corridors of power rather than around the table at the Council of Ministers. Then that's, I'm afraid, is a cynical approach that none of us want to be part of. So I think it is saying, look, we understand that you're going to have your right to frank discussions. We don't need you to jot down every little thought, every objection, every bit of blue sky thinking which might accidentally then find its way onto the front page of the paper and make you look ridiculous. It's not about that at all. This is about that collaborative approach that whoever the next government is, whoever the next scrutiny panels are, can do their job properly and do it with the information they require in good faith, sir. So I'd finish on that point. This should be being done in good faith, and so long as we're all coming to the table with clean hands and a good approach, there should be no objection to supporting this.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Ida.
I think I've heard one word, which was the the gist of what this debate now, and it is trust. And and I agree totally. I mean, it's the one thing that we should strive to achieve in an assembly that's supposed to work together. The one thing about trust is that it has to be reciprocal. It only works if it works both ways. So I'd like to remind some members of the assembly here that scrutiny has not just been scrutiny this time. It's not just been the critical friend. At some point, it's been a group that was bent on failing the state, the government, whatever what they were doing. It has happened. It has happened here. And I'm sorry about that. It's the one thing that I regret the most about this. I came into this assembly thinking, we are special. We're not like the French. We're not like the British. This is a collaborative assembly. And I was really disappointed to see it develop over the years. And I know that COVID was a big part of the breach. But to see it develop into the government and the opposition. And yes, scrutiny has been the opposition at some times, not always. Some panels have been very good, some panels have been occasionally bad, but it has happened. It really has happened. And this government, I'd like to remind this assembly, is by structure a minority. You're elected to run the country, to run the island, as a minority. It's not very easy. It is not very easy. And if the majority tries really hard to oppose you, it's impossible. You're asked to do something which you cannot do, which is impossible. Now, trust. I would really like to have trust. But is there in this document, is there in this P50, a lot about scrutiny making that process open? I don't think so. It's all about, we should know more about how the government works. We really want to go inside your head. We really want to go inside your head, but we won't let you inside ours. We won't let you understand why we're really opposing this. Whether we're really working for the good of the island, or we've just decided that whatever you come out with, we're going to be against. And I'm sorry to say that. But that's the elephant. I'm sorry to say that. This is the elephant in the room. We all know that this has happened time and time again here. And it is sad. And it is, I'm afraid to say, probably a herald of things to come. We'll have governments, we'll have opposition, we'll have parties, we'll look like Westminster. And I don't think that this will be for the advantage of Jersey. And I'm very, very sad to have been. It's interesting to be a part of history, but I'm actually sad to have been a part of it. I think that's a great, great failure for Jersey. Anyway, it is a bit sad that we have a very, very good proposition where there's absolutely no problem with it except for one single word. And we would all have voted for this, we would all have agreed for it if it wasn't for that one single word. What that word says is, we don't trust you. We want everything on the table, but we will not reciprocate. Thank you, sir.
Sir, point of clarification, please, of that speech, please.
I beg your pardon?
A point of clarification,
Point of
please,
clarification. Will you give way for a point of clarification, Deputy? It's up to you.
Yes, of course, sir.
Thank you. I was just wondering if the Deputy would clarify. He said that scrutiny had acted in opposition. I was just wondering if he'd clarify with an example of that, because I'm scratching my head and can't think of any. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I would rather not. I could, and we could do it, but it might have to be in private, sir.
So may I propose the adjournment?
The adjournment is proposed. It is that customary time.
Seconded.
Yes, it's seconded. It seems to me we must stand adjourned now until 2:30. 2:30. 2:15. 2:15. Sorry. I was letting wishful thinking overcome me there. 2:15.